More than 30 crazy One Piece theories. Today I'm bringing you the most complete One Piece theory video you'll see, since it's made up of over 30 completely crazy theories that you can play in the background while doing something else, whether it's working out, working, or even eating, like you're probably doing right now. If that's the case, enjoy your meal, or maybe you've put this on to fall asleep. In that case, good night and sweet dreams. Either way, let me know in the comments because I love reading what you guys say. I really hope you enjoy this video. It took a lot of work to make, so I'd really appreciate it if you left a like and subscribe to the channel. Anyway, I'll stop talking now and let you dive into these 30 plus crazy One Piece theories. And currently, as I'm recording this video, we are in the Elbaf arc. The Straw Hats are in the middle of the conflict of the Elbaf arc, and there is even talk of several power-ups for the end of this arc or even the next one, but I have gone further to the end of One Piece. Let's analyze each of the Straw Hats, one by one, who are currently part of the crew. I say this because it's possible that by the end of One Piece, someone extra might be included, like Loki, Yamato, or perhaps another new character we don't know. And let's start directly with Tony Chopper, the crew's doctor. We begin with Chopper, our adorable human reindeer and doctor, although a bit useless. Currently, Chopper has the ability of the Ito fruit, which is the devil fruit that makes you human, allowing him to change shape, especially thanks to his rumble ball, and he has developed various points, forms, however you want to call them, that grant him different attributes. He has the brain point for thinking, the heavy point for brute strength, the guard point for defense, and his most powerful form, the monster point, where he becomes a giant monster with enormous strength. Before, he used to lose control in Monster Point, but after the time skip, he managed to master it much better. Now he can even talk and reason in that form. In Wano, we already saw that Chopper greatly improved his Rumble Ball with the help of Caesar Clown to extend the duration of the Monster Point to 30 minutes, although at the cost of becoming exhausted and turning into a tiny elderly Chopper afterward. This monster point is so strong that it allowed him to withstand some blows from none other than Queen, one of Kaido's commanders, all during the Battle of Onigashima. I must say, that's not bad at all for Chopper, especially for being a doctor. How did Chopper get these powers? Well, his journey to become strong has been mainly through science with the Rumble Balls and medical training. He himself invented the Rumble Balls after joining the crew under the tutelage of Dr. Kureha to modify the limits of his fruit. During the time skip, he studied on Torino Island and perfected his forms, so now he can transform into almost all his points without using Rumble Ball, except for the Monster Point. His great achievement post-time skip was precisely mastering that Monster Point enough to use it deliberately and not just as a last resort. Now, in terms of Haki, Chopper has not yet shown any of the three variants, and this is understandable. Chopper is a reindeer who gained human intelligence with his fruit and has focused much more on medicine than on being a Haki warrior. However, many of us think it's time for him to get a Haki power-up. Learning even armament Haki would be a huge leap for him, as it could enhance his physical blows several times beyond what he is currently capable of achieving. Imagine Chopper hardening his enormous Monster Point fists with armament Haki. It would be terrifying for his enemies, but unfortunately the narrative reality is that Chopper is not a combat-oriented character. He is the group's doctor, and Oda usually keeps him in that support role, besides using him for comic relief and selling plush toys. And it wouldn't be surprising if we don't see significant power improvements in Chopper, perhaps even until, as I say, the very end of the story. Let's remember that even in his bounty, he's always treated more like a pet than a serious threat. 50 berries, then 100, now 1,000 berries. A joke that will probably continue. In other words, by the logic of the story, Oda might not give Chopper a massive power boost because his main role is to heal the crew and provide cuteness and humor. Is there anything else Chopper can evolve in? If we speculate a bit, yes. His Monster Point could already be considered an almost awakened form of his fruit, but it would be great if at the end of the series, Chopper achieves a true awakening, meaning he can enter Monster Point at will, without needing Rumble Balls and without side effects, that he is able to maintain that monstrous form for a prolonged time and control it completely. And that would be the ultimate power-up for him. Imagine Chopper fighting in his giant form alongside the others, but without limitations. He would be at the level of a giant in terms of physical presence. Another potential theoretical improvement would be that, in addition to armament haki, he awakens observation haki, especially to better detect the vitality of allies and enemies, something that, as a doctor, would make a lot of sense. In summary, Chopper probably won't become extremely powerful in combat, as we will see with the rest of the Straw Hats. And his most logical improvement would be to perfect what he already has, which would be the monster point, and perhaps, at most, add a basic haki. At the end of the day, he will end up being, as always, the adorable reindeer doctor, only he would be able to give you a punch the size of a building if the situation calls for it. Now let's continue with Nami, navigator of the Straw Hats, known as the Cat Burglar. Nami was always considered part of the weak trio of the crew compared to the combat monsters, but things have changed quite a bit recently. Her most notable power-up so far has been becoming a companion of Zeus, a homie cloud from Big Mom's soul, who now lives inside her Klimatact. Thanks to Zeus, Nami gained a huge increase in offensive power. Now she can summon lightning and storms with much more strength than before, to the point of seriously electrocuting very strong enemies. For example, with Zeus's help, she managed to defeat Ulti, one of the Tobirappo, and she did this with a single thunderous electric attack. As for how she got Zeus, it was a matter of luck and cunning. During the Battle of Wano, Big Mom lost control over Zeus, and he ended up taking refuge in Nami's Klimatact. Nami, being clever, showed affection to Zeus and convinced him to stay with her. I would also be convinced to stay with her if she showed me a little affection, and if not too. Since then, Zeus is literally Nami's living weather weapon. Before Zeus, Nami had already been improving her weapon a lot. Let's remember the Klimatact created by Usopp in Alabasta, which was later improved in Scipioea, becoming the perfect Klimatact with dials, and later modified with the weather science that Nami learned in Weatheria during the prize. It even received another upgrade from Usopp later. All these versions allowed Nami to recreate weather effects, generate clouds, heat bubbles, gusts of wind, mirages with temperature changes, etc. Basically, Nami already does things typical of a weather fruit, but using tools. That's why many of us doubt that she will eat any devil fruit, and it's because, well, she doesn't need it. Her weapon achieves similar effects. Also, giving Nami a fruit would mean taking away her ability to swim. And being a navigator, that might be more of a problem than a benefit. In terms of haki, Nami has not shown to use it either. And let's be honest, it doesn't seem very likely that Nami will awaken Armament Haki or the King's Haki, as they don't fit her style. Could she learn Observation Haki? Maybe a little. As a navigator, Nami has a sixth sense for weather changes. It's not Haki per se, but it shows sensitivity to her surroundings. If she developed Observation Haki, it could help her dodge attacks or launch hers with greater accuracy at long range. It wouldn't be far-fetched. Usopp unlocked that Haki in Dressrosa, so Nami could follow that path. Still, it's not certain or vital for her. Now, how far could Nami go with new upgrades? The most interesting aspect points to her Klimatact. It is already very powerful with Zeus inhabiting it, but it could become even better. Let's think about the context of the previous arc. Egghead, Vegapunk, the greatest scientist in the world who was there and is currently in Elbaf through Lilith. These climatic inventions sound like something that might be in his area of expertise. What if Vegapunk/Lilith decides to upgrade Nami's Klimatact? The idea is not far-fetched. In fact, many fans, myself included, believe that Nami could leave Elbaf or the following arcs with a Klimatact that is technologically super enhanced. This is just a theory for now, obviously not confirmed in the manga, but it would be the perfect power-up for Nami given that she excels at using those tools. Imagine Lilith incorporating special materials or adjustments that amplify Zeus's lightning or give access to much more extreme weather phenomena, portable tornadoes, sudden pressure changes, and with Lilith Vegapunk as an ally, the possibilities are enormous. As for the story's logic, Nami probably wouldn't seek to be a super fighter beyond what's necessary. Her main motivation has never been to be strong in a fight, but to fulfill her dreams, drawing that map of the world. She herself has always preferred to avoid having high bounties or attracting the attention of the world government, so even though she has become more capable in battle, and Zeus has indeed made her dangerous, Nami is not going to become part of the monster trio or anything like that. She will remain in a middle range where her intellect, cunning, and now her weather magic will allow her to defeat enemies when the conditions are right, but we won't see her, for example, exchanging punches with an admiral. In summary, her power ceiling is being an increasingly ingenious weather mage, but not becoming a brutally aggressive warrior, and that's fine, because Nami shines by using her head and the weather to her advantage. Now let's move on to Brook, the skeletal musician and swordsman of the crew, artistically known as Soul King. Brook is peculiar in himself. He died decades ago, but his Yomi Yomi no Mi, the Revive fruit, gave him a second life, bringing his soul back to the world of the living. Currently, Brook's greatest power comes precisely from this fruit and how he has developed it. What can Brook do? He can do everything a good swordsman and musician would do, but while being dead, and he is extremely agile and light, as he is basically just bones. He wields his sword skillfully and combines his music with combat. The most special aspect of his soul power is that Brook can separate his soul from his own body, projecting himself as a spirit to explore or also to attack. He has also shown a certain affinity with the spirit world and the cold of the afterlife. His sword attacks sometimes freeze the enemy as if bringing them from the cold of death. In fact, his sword is called Soul Solid and can produce ice. Brook was even able to face homies, objects with souls of Big Mom and Whole Cake, all thanks to his own soul being able to counter Big Mom's influence. As for Haki, Brook has not manifested any type yet, given that he is a comedic and secondary support character in fights. Oda has not had him use Haki so far, but he could learn it. Well, possibly yes. Brook could awaken Observation Haki in the future. This would be useful for better supporting his companions, detecting enemies not directly visible, which would be helpful when he projects his soul far away, for example. A Brook with Observation Haki could be a fantastic sentinel for the crew, detecting all hidden presences. And Armament Haki, well, it would also be useful for him to have it to fight certain Logias, or very resistant enemies. But if I had to bet, Observation fits a bit more with his support role and his personality, as he is funny and perceptive. Imagine him saying, I have Observation Haki, but I don't have eyes. Yo ho ho ho. Now let's talk about something very interesting, the possible awakening of Brook's fruit. His Yomi Yomi no Mi is unique. It already allowed him to return from death once and manage his soul in very creative ways. So what else can he do if he awakens it? Well, here we enter theoretical territory. Some fans speculate that if Brook awakens his fruit, he could influence other souls, not just his own. Does it sound a bit strange and a bit dark? Well, a little, but imagine if Brook could, for example, temporarily separate an enemy's soul from their body. It would be a devastating effect, basically knocking someone out by taking their soul, even if just for a moment. Another extreme possibility is that Brook could absorb or consume the souls of others to empower himself or even learn techniques from them. This last part is highly speculative and perhaps too dark for the tone of One Piece, but the idea arises from the fact that an awakening of a paramecia usually extends the power to others or the environment. Brook, in theory, could project his life energy into the world around him. It has also been joked that if he gave another massive concert as Soul King, with that power he could give his entire audience an out-of-body experience, literally. And it sounds funny, but also a bit weird. Brook has already fulfilled a good part of his dream. He became famous again as a musician and hopes to reunite with Laboon. As for the fight, he has had his heroic moments, like stealing a poneglyph right under Big Mom's nose or helping Robin against Black Maria. But he is not part of the core of the strongest fighters. It is unlikely that Oda will turn him into a fighting machine on the level of Zoro or Sanji, but such a groundbreaking awakening might not happen, but if it does, it will probably be used in a comedic or specific way. In summary, Brook's ceiling will probably be learning some observation haki, mainly to complement his kit and continue taking advantage of his undead nature in clever ways. His soul ability is already quite useful for espionage and mischief. Let's remember how in Whole Cake Island he went through closed doors and scared enemies by appearing as a ghost, and in combat, as long as he can freeze opponents and deliver good sword strikes, he will fulfill his role. Brook will continue to be that rockstar invincible to the passage of time, literally because he is already dead. We now continue with Franky, the super cyborg and right-hand man in the crew's engineering. Franky is already quite strong as he is. During the Wano arc, we saw him defeat Sasaki on his own, one of the Tobi Rappo, who were part of the elite. He achieved this by combining the power of his mecha, Franky Shogun, the giant robot he built, with his own modified body and arsenal of weapons. Currently, Franky does not have any known fruit or haki powers. His power lies in his technology and brute strength. After the time skip, Franky rebuilt himself with resources from Vegapunk's old laboratory in Valdivia, equipping himself with things like the Radical Beam, a laser inspired by the pacifists, and many new weapons. His body runs on cola as fuel, which is peculiar but effective. Basically, Franky is a walking arsenal. He has cannons, lasers, interchangeable arms, vehicles. How did Franky get his upgrades? Well, unlike others, he builds them himself. Franky has progressively modified himself from a common human who became a cyborg after the accident in Water 7, and then, during the time skip, he became even more mechanical, so much so that his face is now a metal plate, for example. He also designed and built the Thousand Sunny ship with wood from the legendary Atom Tree, showcasing his talent as an engineer-carpenter. Every time Franky finds new technology, he incorporates it. An example was that after reading Vegapunk's documents, he implemented the laser in his body, so we could say that Franky's continuous power-up is his engineering, and he can always add more resistant materials or more powerful weapons to his body. But then, what could be next for Franky? This is where the possibilities get a little exciting, and it's similar to Nami's case. Having left Egghead, but with Lilith as the Vegapunk in Elbaf, it's quite hopeful to think that Franky could leave Elbaf with a significant upgrade. Lilith Vegapunk is literally the scientist whose inventions Franky has revered for years, and it's the golden opportunity to learn new tricks, as he couldn't do this in Egghead due to the situation. So he could get, for example, new types of laser weaponry, upgrades to his suit, or even to the Sunny. There is a theory that perhaps Vegapunk could help him redesign his body, maybe making it a bit more efficient or compact without losing power. Can you imagine Franky returning to a perhaps more human design, but with the same current strength thanks to Vegapunk's futuristic science? Let's see, it would be interesting, although there are many people who already like Franky's current form, but seeing that they changed Robin's hairstyle to resemble the pre-time skip one, maybe it could be there. Another quite obvious area for improvement is the Haki. Franky has not used Haki so far, but since he fights hand-to-hand, Armament Haki would be perfect for him. It would be great to see him harden his metal fists with Haki to enhance his punches like the strong right, or make his Franky Shogun robot even more resistant. A cyborg covered in black Haki armor sounds great and would fit well with Franky's tough style. The question is whether he will have the time or need to learn it in the middle of the final plot, and it could be that perhaps in the final war Franky ends up using Haki in some way, but Franky's narrative ace up his sleeve is Pluton. Let's remember that in Go Event, it was revealed that Franky possessed the blueprints of the ancient weapon Pluton, a legendary warship. Franky decided to burn these blueprints so they wouldn't fall into the wrong hands, but that connection with Pluton could tie him to future events. We know that the real Pluton is hidden in Wap, and many fans speculate that later on Franky could build a new Pluton, but using the Thousand Sunny as a base. Or even discover Pluton himself and pilot it. What would this mean in terms of power? Having an ancient weapon under control is a game changer. Pluton is supposedly a battleship capable of devastating entire islands. If Franky manages to command such a machine, the crew would gain a gigantic military advantage. Of course, this depends a bit on how Oda is going to handle the ancient weapons, but the possibility is there. In terms of power up, it's not that Franky becomes physically stronger, but he would have the most powerful weapon of the seas at his disposal, greatly increasing not only the narrative danger, but also the influence, taking it to another level. Now regarding limits, perhaps a bit more terrestrial, a bit more logical. No, Franky is a curious case because technically he doesn't have a clear ceiling other than what the available technology imposes. He can always find a harder alloy, a more powerful fuel, or a bigger weapon. However, within the story, Oda will probably keep him a step below the true monster fighters. Franky usually tends to face opponents of a high intermediate level, like a Tobirapo, as we saw earlier, or a Vice Admiral, but I doubt we will see him defeat an Admiral, or of course a Yonkou one-on-one. For example, his role is to be the heavy fire support and construction, not the protagonist of the most epic battles. Additionally, Oda balances the crew quite well, as the monstrous trio Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji have more exaggerated powers, while Franky compensates with ingenuity. In conclusion, Franky's ceiling will be somewhat marked by his ability to invent. It is possible that we will see him with new equipment made by Vegapunk, perhaps using ultra-resistant materials or advanced science weapons. Maybe he will integrate new technology from the Seraphim, or perhaps he can incorporate a system based on the discoveries Vegapunk made in Egghead, an energy shield, anti-gravity boots, who knows? But well, if he learns Haki, it would be the icing on the cake to complement him. And in a distant horizon, if the Pluton plot is activated, then Franky could become the man behind the greatest weapon in history, solidifying him as a legend among the engineers of the sea. Very, very cool for Franky. I like it. We arrive at Usopp, the shooter and professional liar of the team, who is ironically called God Usopp since Dressrosa. Usopp is a special case because unlike many of his companions, his strength does not lie in brute force or supernatural powers, but in his ingenuity, marksmanship, and incredible luck. Currently, Usopp fights using his giant slingshot, the Kuro Kabuto, and a variety of pop greens, which are seeds of exotic plants he developed during his training on Boeing Island. These seeds, when thrown, quickly grow into plants with offensive or utilitarian effects. Vines that trap, exploding bamboos, giant flowers. Usopp also retains tricks like the smoke star, the spicy chili star, and other very creative ammunition. His aim is exceptional. Let's remember that he was able to shoot sugar in Dressrosa from hundreds of meters away and without a direct line of sight, something he managed to awaken at that moment thanks to observation haki, which ironically he hasn't used in a very notable way on screen after that miraculous shot. He perceived the aura of Luffy, Law, and Sugar, and with that, he was able to calculate his shot despite the obstacles. This was a great moment and an increase in his abilities. But how did Usopp get that power up? Well, under extreme pressure, his friends were about to be turned into toys, and he overcame his cowardice for a second to save them, awakening the haki. It was more of a sudden burst than conscious mastery. Since then, Oda has kept Usopp in his typical scared personality, so we haven't seen him train or make much use of that haki. Usopp also improved somewhat in physical endurance during the time skip, but he still has a relatively normal build. Why doesn't Usopp become stronger quickly? Well, because of the narrative. Usopp is the normal man of the group in many ways. Fearful, sometimes weak-willed, very human. His dream is to become a brave warrior of the sea, which implies that he is not yet. If suddenly Usopp overcame all his fears and became completely brave and powerful, his character arc would be complete at that moment. Oda wants Usopp to remain the same, the clever coward, until the climactic moment of his development. That's why, no matter what he achieves, like in Dressrosa where he was a hero, he always shows fear again afterward. Keeping him at that earthly level makes his eventual moment of ultimate bravery much more emotional, so Oda deliberately doesn't give Usopp big power-ups in the traditional sense. We will not see Usopp suddenly with superhuman strength or devastating martial techniques because it would break the purpose of his own character. So what potential for evolution does Usopp have from here to the end? There are some interesting ideas, and curiously many come from the lies that Usopp has told. In One Piece, Usopp's lies sometimes come true in an ironic way. He said he saw a giant fish, that his droppings were like islands, and then he saw it when leaving Little Garden. He said he encountered a village of dwarves and later found the Tontada. He said he fought with a giant mole and fought with Miss Merry Christmas in Alabasta, and like these, many more. But among his most recent lies are that he possesses Conqueror's Haki and that he will command an army of 8,000 people. It sounds very far-fetched, but what if it turns out to be true in the end? The idea of Usopp awakening the Conqueror's Haki is probably the most speculative of all, but there are those who support it. The Conqueror's Haki, let's remember, is that rare power that only those with overwhelming will have. Usopp, at first glance, doesn't fit. He trembles with fear constantly. How could someone so cowardly have the King's Haki? Well, those who support this theory point out that Usopp, deep down, has a very strong will when it matters. We saw him face Luffy himself in Water 7 for his own convictions, or risk his life in East Blue to save Robin. Additionally, his lie about having the Conqueror's Haki could be Oda playing with the idea that eventually, in a moment of great courage, Usopp might actually manifest it. It would be ironic and epic. The boy who always runs away ends up literally knocking out enemies with his spirit. This is perhaps more of a fan fantasy, but I can't help but mention it because it's part of the conversation that is most on the table about his potential. A more viable evolution is for Usopp to fully develop his observation haki. He has already taken the first step, so he could learn to use it at will. Let's imagine Usopp in Elbaf as he is currently. Here, he could further train his aim. Perhaps Shanks could return with Usopp's father, Yasopp, who is one of the best snipers in the world, and maybe he could learn legendary shooting techniques and combine that with advanced observation haki. There might be a moment in the future to make the perfect shot. This does sound possible and useful, especially considering the final battle. And Usopp has to learn to take down crucial things with a single long-distance shot. Also, let's not forget the army of 8,000 men I mentioned. Currently, Usopp is quite popular. The dwarves of Dressrosa adore him like a god. He has giant friends. And it wouldn't be strange if by the end of Elbaf, Usopp wins over the giants with some feat or story and ends up leading a battalion of giant warriors in the final war. This would fulfill his lie about the 8,000, since one giant would be worth many men, meaning that perhaps with 800 giants, it would be like 8,000 men. And it would be a moment of redemption for him, standing in front of an imposing army, truly being the great sea warrior Usopp, the one he always wanted to be. In terms of power, commanding an army is more of a tactical achievement than a personal one, but it would undoubtedly make Usopp feared worldwide, as he himself fantasized. In short, Usopp is not going to have a sudden power-up, like now he will launch a Kamehameha. His improvements would be gradual and narrative in nature, perfecting his shot and his observation haki, perhaps obtaining better ammunition, and eventually demonstrating genuine bravery that impresses everyone. Perhaps the climax of his development is just a heroic act where he deceives the enemy or inspires his allies in a brilliant way. And who knows, at that point, at his peak, we might even see a hint of Conqueror's haki emanating from Usopp if it serves the story, as a metaphor that he has finally become that brave person he always wanted to be. But until he gets there, Usopp will stay true to his style, a coward with a lot of luck, creativity, and a very brave hidden heart that beats stronger when his friends need him. Let's continue with Nico Robin, the archaeologist of the crew, also called the Devil Child by the government. Robin is not known for overwhelming physical strength, but for the unique power of her fruit, Hahana, the flower fruit, which allows her to sprout parts of her body on any surface. Currently, Robin can literally create hundreds of limbs at a T-Oau, which she used impressively in Dressrosa, making a giant hand to hold Hakuba, and especially in Wano, where she obtained a long-awaited power-up, the Demonio Fluer. But what is the Demonio Fluer? It is a new technique or form that Robin revealed in her fight against Black Maria. It consists of Robin making a giant duplicate of herself bloom, but with a demonic appearance. Dark skin, horns, demon wings. She truly lived up to her nickname of the Demon Child in this form. Additionally, Robin greatly multiplies her size and strength and was able to defeat Black Maria with a devastating final blow, the giant hand Spang. This was her first major one-on-one victory since practically Skypiea many years ago, so we all celebrated it. But how did Robin get this power-up? It seems to be the result of her training during the time skip with the Revolutionary Army and her own ingenuity. Robin mentioned that Sabo and Koala taught her certain things. From Koala, she learned basic fishman karate, which is why she was able to use a water palm attack to extinguish the flames in Onigashima, and from Sabo, possibly, concepts of hand-to-hand combat. They also called her a demon, symbolically, which perhaps inspired the visual form of the Demonio Fluer. When Robin found herself cornered by Black Maria, she decided to play that hidden card we hadn't seen. It's likely she had already developed it off-screen and was just waiting for the right moment to use it. It is not a formal awakening of her fruit, but rather an evolution of her techniques, using the same power as always, but on a larger scale. Speaking of awakening, Robin's Hana-Hana fruit is already quite unusual. Normally, a Paramecia user can only affect their own body, but Robin can make her parts appear on other people and objects, also interacting with the environment at a distance. And this is something typically only seen in awakened fruits. That is why some say that Robin's power is almost awakened from the start, and that Oda designed her that way, and that we will not see an additional classic awakening. In other words, the Demonio Fluer could be the maximum her fruit reaches in terms of manifestations, without adding new abilities of magical origin. However, you never know. An awakening of the Hana-Hana no Mi, if it existed, might allow Robin to create complete clones of herself, instead of just a giant half-body, or make parts sprout from other people. Can you imagine making arms sprout from the enemy's own body to immobilize them? Very crazy, but interesting. Where Robin clearly has room for improvement is in Haki. Robin has not used Haki so far in the story. However, as the enemies become stronger, many with Haki or Logia fruits, not very powerful Paramecias, she could greatly benefit from learning even armament Haki. Let's imagine that Robin could cover those hundreds of arms she can sprout with armament haki. Her traditional clutch techniques, the bone-breaking ones, would be devastating, even against very resistant opponents, because the hardened arms would have much more strength and could even harm Logia users. Picture the scene. Robin smiling as a swarm of black hands appears, slapping some unfortunate soul. It would be very, very epic. For him, it would be terrifying. Moreover, Robin's fighting style, which does not require brute strength but strategic placement of her limbs, would be perfectly complemented by haki. In my opinion, it is almost certain that Robin will learn at least a bit of haki before the end, maybe during the Elba arc itself, and even observation haki would also be useful to anticipate attacks when she multiplies. But if I have to choose, armament haki would give her more offensive advantage. But how strong could Robin become? Since she is not one of the main fighters, don't expect her to reach Yonkou commander levels or anything like that. Her importance lies in knowledge, in reading the poneglyphs, but Oda has already shown us that he wants her to be able to defend herself. The Demon Fleur was that step, so Robin's ceiling in terms of power could be a Robin with the Demon Fleur plus armament haki. With this, she could face mid-high level enemies with some confidence. I don't imagine her, for example, defeating an Admiral one-on-one, but she could handle opponents of the caliber of the Tobirapo type or lower commanders. Narratively, moreover, Robin will always have others protecting her from great dangers. Being the only one who can decipher the path to Laugh-Tale, she is a priority target. For that reason, it makes sense for her to increase her strength a bit so as not to be completely a damsel in distress. In conclusion, Robin already made a necessary leap in Wano by showing us what she is capable of. Her greatest improvement would probably be mastering haki, especially armament haki, to enhance her existing techniques. I wouldn't expect another mode, another transformation beyond the Demon Fleur. Maybe she will perfect it by making it last longer or move freely. Perhaps we will see variants like a complete Demon Fleur, a giant full body one using its demonic wings to glide in the air, or things like that. And those would be logical evolutions of what she has already shown. But beyond that, his role in the story does not require him to be a beast in fighting, only to be able to survive and fulfill his mission of reading the poneglyphs. And with the Demon Fleur and a possible haki, he could surely do it, even if he faces some CP0 agent or another bounty hunter along the way. Now it's Jinbe's turn, the helmsman and former pirate captain who officially joined after Whole Cake and during the Wano arc. An interesting character because, unlike many of the previous ones, he started in the crew already being very powerful. Jinbe was in the elite of the pirates from before. He has impressive strength and technique in hand-to-hand combat, especially his fishman style, with which he can manipulate water, even the water in the opponent's body, mainly to launch long-distance attacks. He also masters fishman jujutsu, which is more useful underwater. And indeed, Jinbe is virtually invincible in the water, being a fishman. Add to that all his experience. He fought side by side with Ace for days, faced admirals, blocked attacks from Akainu and Aokiji in Marineford to protect Luffy, and more recently, defeated Who's Who with relative ease. Jinbe possesses armament haki, as we saw him harden to block attacks. For example, he successfully stopped an attack from Big Mom and Whole Cake alongside Robin and the others. He should also have observation haki, although there hasn't been an obvious scene, but like every veteran warrior, it is almost certain that he possesses it to a basic degree. What he hasn't shown is Conqueror's haki, at least not until now. Let's talk about the possible improvements for Jinbe. Honestly, Jinbe doesn't need a clear power-up right now. What he needs are opportunities to shine. In Onigashima, he had his duel with Who's Who and dispatched him, showing a good combo of karate and strong punches. But being new to the crew, we haven't seen all his potential yet. Is there something Jinbe could develop further? Maybe Conqueror's haki? It is not certain that he has it, but there are details that make us think he might have it. First, Jinbe has a strong will and is a natural leader, as he was the captain of the Sun Pirates, and we even saw him exercise some leadership in the Marineford War. When Big Mom tried to intimidate him by taking his life, that soul roulette, Jinbe stood firm without fear, demonstrating an indomitable spirit. That scene practically screamed Conqueror's haki, at least in terms of attitude. Although there wasn't an actual burst of haki, it wouldn't be surprising if Jinbe turned out to be a Conqueror's haki user, and Oda reveals it in a future crucial battle. If so, Jinbe would join Luffy's club within the crew in having that rarity. It would be a narrative power-up, as it would confirm that Jinbe is of that legendary character mold, but in practice, it wouldn't drastically change how he fights unless he learns to infuse that haki into attacks, something reserved for very few. Another possible but likely power-up is a Devil Fruit. However, this is almost dismissible. Fishmen rarely eat fruits, as they would lose their greatest natural advantage, which is being able to swim freely. Jinbe especially loves the sea, and his style depends on being in contact with water, so I don't see him sacrificing that for a fruit power. He is already very strong without needing any magical extra. So what is Jinbe's ceiling? I would say that Jinbe is already at his ceiling or close to it. He is currently a combatant at the level of a Yonkou commander, perhaps comparable in strength to a Jack, or even to Queen in certain scenarios. By the end of the series, Jinbe probably won't increase his brute strength much more. Rather, we will see him go all out against very high level opponents. Consider that in the final saga, Jinbe could face an admiral or some big shot from the Navy or the government. There he would unleash all his karate, his armament haki to the fullest, which he already has, but we haven't seen it at its limit, and perhaps, as we've mentioned, if he comes to possess Conqueror's haki, he might use it to dominate lesser soldiers on the battlefield. Narratively, Jinbe is older and wiser. His role is often to advise Luffy or calm things down. He is not a character on an upward trajectory like the younger ones, but one already established. That's why I don't expect huge surprises in terms of new power for him, but rather the satisfaction of seeing him fight without reservations with what he already has. Even so, if Oda wanted to give him a little boost, he could give us that confirmation of Conqueror's haki in him, which would fit well with his nickname of Knight of the Sea, an imposing knight worthy of kings. It's also possible that we might see some supreme technique of Fishman karate that Jinbe hasn't used yet. In summary, Jinbe is already a tank within the crew. His evolution would be more demonstrative than transformative. We will see him stand alongside the greats without the need for crazy transformations. And if some new haki is confirmed in him, that would be great, but he doesn't need it to be relevant. Jinbe is proof that a character already introduced in their maturity can contribute to the final story by providing experience, absolute loyalty to Luffy, and reliable strength when needed. So while Jinbe doesn't have a very obvious power-up pending, like Nami or Franky did, let's not underestimate him, because in the end, when we see the Knight of the Sea fighting seriously, we'll understand why even Ace and other characters respected him so much. Now we move on to the third monster of the crew, Sanji, our cook with a seductive humor and fiery kicks. Sanji has always been part of the main trio of fighters alongside Luffy and Zoro, and in Wano he reached new levels of power thanks to certain family revelations or his current situation. Sanji uses the blackleg combat style, meaning kicks and foot techniques without using his hands, because they are for cooking of course. He was already capable of incredible feats, like splitting rock with spinning kicks. But his signature move since Enies Lobby is the Diablo Jambe. Sanji spins at high speed to ignite his leg with fire, significantly increasing the power of his kicks. Before Wano, the Diablo Jambe was his peak, allowing him, for example, to damage the Pacifista after the time skip and hit other characters like Oven. Now in Wano, Sanji experienced an awakening of his genetic modifications. What does this mean? Well, it turned out that Sanji, being the son of Judge Vinsmoke, had mad scientist alterations in his DNA that were supposed to give him an exoskeleton and super strength like his brothers, but they never manifested in his childhood thanks to his mother Sora, who humanized him. By using the Germa raid suit several times that he was given in whole cake, something in his body awakened those latent genes. Suddenly, Sanji discovered that his durability and physical strength skyrocketed. His body gained a kind of invisible exoskeleton that makes him much more resistant, so much so that in Wano, Queen broke a sword on his neck while trying to cut him. All this without Sanji suffering any damage. He can also regenerate much faster from injuries, and his speed increased. Initially, Sanji was distressed because he feared losing his humanity or emotions, like his brothers, but in the end, he kept his heart and took advantage of the enhancements. With that new durability and strength, Sanji took his Diablo Jam to the next level, Air Dried Jam. This is an enhanced version where the fire on his leg turns blue, indicating an even higher temperature, and he explained that with his mutated blood pumping more powerfully, and perhaps combining the technology of the suit invisibly, he can generate much hotter flames. With the air-dried jam, Sanji literally steamrolled Queen at the climax of their fight, breaking several of his bones with lightning-fast combos. Queen, who had a bounty of 1,320,000,000 and lots of tricks, was decisively defeated. So Sanji is above the level of a typical commander of a Yonkou, at least from the past saga. He is already compared to characters like Marco Katakuri, which is plausible. How did Sanji get that power up? Well, it was a mix of inheritance and circumstances. His 2-year training in the Kamabakura Kingdom made him much stronger, and he gained the recipes for the culinary attack, etc. Although that might be more support, but the big leap came from his Vinsmoke blood. Unintentionally, the raid suit catalyzed his genetic transformation. Sanji decided not to use the suit anymore and broke it after feeling he was becoming a monster, but he kept the physical advantages of it forever. In other words, he became a superhuman like in Dragon Ball in a way. Tough skin, strong bones, acceleration, and so on. Then, with his usual combat ingenuity, he created the eye-free jump in the middle of the fight, using the new strength to take his classic technique to the maximum. It wasn't so much about prior training, but an emergent in battle backed by his scientific background. But what could improve Sanji even more towards the end? Well, one thing is to completely master his genetic modifications. Now that he knows he has them, even if he disowns his family, he could investigate how they work. Perhaps he can discover new applications. For example, his brothers had specific abilities. One is electric, another uses poison, and he did not show an extra elemental ability. Beyond the fire, he generates himself with friction, and now with his internal power. Maybe his Vinsmoke power is precisely the generation of heat or internal fire, enhanced by emotion. Remember the Hell Memories attack on Layla Gyojin, where he burned in flames from complete rage. He could develop a more powerful version of the eye-free jump, maybe white or black flames, just to say something, multiplying the damage. But since the eye-free jump already surpassed the devil jump, it's natural to think that in the final battle, Sanji will have a moment where he pushes his legs to the limit. In terms of Haki, Sanji does possess advanced observation Haki in the sense of being very perceptive. He was able to dodge Katakuri's attacks instinctively to protect someone, and has demonstrated detecting presences as in Punk Hazard. His armament Haki is also assumed to be present, although Oda curiously never drew his leg turning black. We all assume that when hitting tough enemies, Sanji uses basic armament. It may be that Oda hasn't emphasized it much for aesthetic reasons, as the literal black leg wouldn't be very noticeable. Perhaps in future confrontations, we will see Sanji use armament Haki explicitly to, let's say, not break his leg against a Logia, so a possible minor power-up is to confirm and strengthen his armament Haki. He might even reach an advanced level of armament to burn from the inside, combining it with his fiery kicks. That would be terrible for whoever receives it, and Conqueror's Haki. Well, unlike Zoro, Sanji has not shown signs of possessing it. Some fans argue that all members of the monster trio should have it, but honestly, the story does not suggest it for Sanji. He has a lot of determination, yes, but his ambition is different. He wants to find the All Blue and protect his friends, not be the most dominant in something. I would bet that Sanji will not have Conqueror's Haki, and if he does have it, well, it would be a big surprise. I do not consider it necessary for his character or growth. A very interesting narrative aspect of Sanji and the Germa is that, although he broke ties with his family, there are possibilities that in the final war, Sanji might end up leading the forces of the Germa Devil Six in some way. He is the legitimate Prince of Germa, although he renounced it, but his brothers owe him favors since Whole Cake, and Judge surely noticed Sanji's feats. A temporary alliance could occur. Imagine Sanji, who guided the Germa, now leading his army, his clone soldiers, to fight against the world government, because it would benefit both. It would be an ironic but epic development, fulfilling a blood destiny without Sanji betraying his character. He would use that military power for a good cause, not for conquest. However, this is more an argument for personal improvement than for power. In conclusion, Sanji already had his great evolutionary leap in Wano with the eye-free jump and the exoskeleton. His final ceiling could be to fully exploit that combo of genetics plus fire to create even more destructive attacks. He could also establish himself as an inspiring leader in battle, commanding, for example, as I say, the Germa warriors or the Sunny's allies in the final battle, which fits with his role as a renegade prince. But in terms of limitations, Sanji will probably not surpass Zoro and much less Luffy. Oda is very careful about the balance between them. Sanji will continue to be amazing, but Zoro and Luffy are ahead in raw power. That said, Sanji will have his own niche, overwhelming speed, refined technique, and many other things. At the end of the series, I imagine him as the fastest man in the East Blue, so to speak, capable of setting the air on fire with his kicks and taking down high-caliber opponents. Perhaps he will face a Marine Admiral in the final war. That would be a definitive test of his power. And let's not forget his other power, which isn't for fighting, but is important: cooking. Sanji can boost his friends with his banquets. It started with the dishes that restored Luffy's energy. It's not far-fetched that at a critical moment, Sanji's culinary skill could make the difference. For example, preparing something to counteract a poison, or giving Luffy and Zoro an extra energy boost during a meal. It's a rather different ace up the sleeve, but relevant to his role. In summary, Sanji is already quite powerful after Wano, and any future power increase will be more about perfecting what he has obtained than something entirely new. We will see him better understanding his limits and maybe using more creative techniques with what he already has. Ifrit will be his signature from now on, and he might take it to another level in the great final battle. In the meantime, he will continue to be the gallant knight who delivers fiery kicks to anyone who threatens his captain, or worse, a lady in danger. We arrive at Zoro, the number 2 swordsman of the crew and the future best swordsman in the world. Zoro has had quite straightforward progress throughout the series. He keeps taking more powerful swords, cutting tougher enemies, and mastering new sword and haki techniques. Currently, after the events of Wano, he had the sword Enma, one of the 21 Wazamono, the top grade swords. Enma is special because it draws out the haki of its users, extracting it in large quantities. With that sword, Zoro managed to do something impressive. He awakened his advanced conqueror's haki and imbued it into the swords during the fight with King. That is to say, Zoro can now perform cuts imbued not only with armament haki, but also with the aura of the Conqueror, which greatly amplifies his cutting power. Let's remember that with a brief moment of that, he managed to injure Kaido on the rooftop. This was his great power-up in Wano, confirming that he possesses Conqueror's haki and learning to use it in hand-to-hand combat. Let's recap his current powers. Zoro wields 3 swords, the Santoryu technique, and has several signature techniques, from the classic onigiri to the most recent technique with which he cut King. His current swords are the Wadai Chimoni, the white sword inherited from his childhood friend, Kuina, who is currently Zunesha. The Sandai Kitetsu, the cursed sword of lower grade that he used in Logue Town. The Enma, the other Wazamono that replaced Shusui. Zoro can also use his 9-sword technique, the Ashura, which seems like a spiritual manifestation of his combative aura. He looks like a demon with 3 heads and 6 arms with 9 swords. He first demonstrated that technique in Eni's lobby, and used it again against Kaido, where it was hinted that it was linked to his Conqueror's haki, as Kaido perceived it and said, "Do you have Conqueror's haki?" As for haki, Zoro has armament haki at a very high level, as he was able to cut through the extremely tough body of Kaido using the secret technique of Ryo, which he learned by observing Higoro and the samurai. His observation haki is quite average. Zoro has never been especially skilled at dodging like Sanji, although he has pretty good reflexes. Interestingly, Zoro has rare cases of perception, like sensing the breath of things to cut steel against Mr. One. But formally, observation is the area of haki where he could improve the most, because he hasn't shown anything like being able to see into the future or at a large range. Now we know what he has, and he has used it offensively. With that, Zoro entered the league of the top characters. But what does Zoro need to reach his goal of being the best swordsman? Mainly 2 things: forging his black swords and acquiring a supreme grade sword. In the world of One Piece, we only know of a few permanent black swords. The most famous is Yoru, Mihawk's sword, which is a Sajo Wazamono. And the other is Shusui, which was originally the sword of the samurai Ryuma. These swords turned black from the continuous use of so much haki. Ihawk explained to Zoro that forging a black sword involves imbuing it with haki so many times and so intensely that it changes color permanently. Zoro has not managed to do that with any of his, so it is expected that Zoro will turn at least 1, if not all of his swords into black blades before the end, as to surpass Mihawk he will have to match him in that achievement. And I would bet that the first will be the Wado Ichimonji, the sword with which he has the most emotional connection. That sword contains Kuina's will, and it is the only one that has been with him from the beginning. Turning the Wado Ichimonji black would be like immortalizing that will. He could also do it with the Enma, since the Enma is a sword hungry for haki, practically made to be a black sword someday. Another option would be to obtain a supreme grade sword, a Sayo Wasamono. Currently none of the 3 are. The Wado and the Enma are of a great grade, 1 level below the supreme. The Sandai Kitetsu is of a much lower grade. To be the best swordsman, it would be appropriate for Zoro to wield at least 1 supreme sword. Since Mihawk has 1, Roger had 1, even Shanks has 1, and Whitebeard also had 1. So where would Zoro get such a weapon from? One possibility is that the Enma becomes black. Another is that he replaces the Sandai Kitetsu with its older sister. We know that the higher ranked Kitetsu, the Shodai Kitetsu, is one of the 12 known supreme swords. Many people theorize that the bald Gorosei, Inuzojuro, possesses the Shodai Kitetsu sword because the design of his sword matches identically with the Kitetsu. If that were true, eventually that sword could come into play, and it wouldn't be far-fetched for Zoro to end up measuring his sword against that character's. Another option would be that in Wano he had the Niigata, but Zoro never got to use it, it remained stored. It could be that in the future Zoro obtains the Niigata or the Shodai. In any case, if I see Zoro wielding a higher grade Kitetsu to complete his final trio, it would be poetic. He has carried the youngest one for a long time and might replace it with its ancestor in the final stretch, thus taking on the ultimate curse of that line of katanas. Another possible area of growth is observation haki. As I mentioned, Zoro is mainly about armament and now Conqueror. His observation is standard. Does Zoro need advanced observation haki to see the future? Maybe not to be the best swordsman, but it could help him against certain rivals. For example, if he faces someone super fast or who uses tricks, imagine against a Shiryu of the Rain who can become invisible with the Shusuke no Mi, Zoro would have to sharpen his senses to not be caught off guard. A Zoro who can sense an invisible or hidden enemy thanks to observation haki would be covering that weakness. So I don't rule out that Zoro might train a bit more in that aspect, or that in the final battle under stress he might also awaken some extra level of observation. Let's remember that in the battle against Mr. One, he was attacked from blind angles, and Zoro managed to react by hearing the breath of the steel, which is like a very primitive form of observation haki. I don't expect Zoro to have a level of haki like Katakuri's, but he could have his combat instinct more refined, and this would complete his package. But how overpowered could Zoro end up being? Well, if all the above is fulfilled, he would have 3 black swords, 1 of supreme grade, mastered conqueror's haki, maximum armament, and decent observation. Frankly, he would be at the level of legends like Rayleigh, and that is the goal. Zoro will surely end the series as the strongest swordsman in the world, possibly having defeated Mihawk in a duel, or symbolically surpassed him in some way, and perhaps having accomplished some memorable feat, like cutting something impossible. Already in the final war, let's see Zoro make a cut that goes down in history, like Mihawk cutting that iceberg in Marineford, but much more impressive. As for narrative limitations, Zoro has always been presented as the second in command, the right-hand man of the Pirate King. His power should not overshadow Luffy's, but it must be overwhelming enough so that no one doubts he is the ideal first mate. Oda already achieves this. In the Wano arc, Zoro shown almost as much as Luffy and defeated King. I doubt he will have another saga where he stands out as much, but in the final battle, there might be a key moment. Zoro against Mihawk 2, a Zoro against Shiryu, a Zoro measuring the sword against Sumgor. In any of these scenarios, Zoro will probably demonstrate the fruit of his final training. That is, he will reveal his first sword turned black or unleash a new, more powerful Ashura technique. There have also been theories about his closed left eye, which might hide some secret, but it could just be a scar without much significance. I won't delve into that because it's too uncertain. If it turns out there's something with his eye, like a hidden power, it would be a very unexpected twist, but it is most likely just a training wound with Mihawk and a symbol of his sacrifice. In summary, Zoro is already at the peak of his journey. He just needs to add the finishing touches, forge the swords with haki at the maximum level, possibly change a supreme sword, refine his observation haki if the story requires it. With this, there will be no rival with a sword or without one who can match him. His name will be feared across all the seas as the new Hawkeye. Zoro's path is very straightforward, but that doesn't make it any less exciting because each step involves colossal challenges. The final step could even be defeating Draculae Mihawk, the current #1 in dueling, which will surely be legendary. And when Zoro achieves that, he will have fulfilled his promise to Kina and Luffy to never lose again until he becomes the best swordsman. There is no narrative limiter preventing Zoro from reaching that point. On the contrary, his growth is practically a fact established by the dream he pursues. So get ready to see Zoro perform feats much more absurd than what we have seen so far from now until the end of One Piece. Finally, we close with Captain Monkey D. Luffy and future king of the pirates. Luffy is undoubtedly the character whose power has grown exponentially in the latest arc, to the point where many will say he is already broken or too strong, and it's that Luffy already reached his known power peak in Wano and perfected it in Egghead by awakening the new nature of his devil fruit and mastering all types of advanced haki. Let's briefly review his current state, although most already know it. Luffy ate the Gomu Gomu no Mi as a child, which we thought was a rubber paramechia, but it turned out to actually be the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, the sun god Nika, and this fruit would grant him a rubber body with cartoon-like properties, especially after awakening. Luffy developed throughout his series his second gear, third gear, fourth gear techniques, each to overcome recent challenges, but the big leap came in Wano, where on the brink of defeat with Kaido, he awakened the fifth gear, his Nika form, where he fully unleashes the imaginative power of that fruit. In Gear 5, Luffy becomes literally free in fighting style. He can do any cartoon-like craziness he imagines, inflate his body to gigantic sizes, turn the ground into rubber, punch the air, transform into absurd figures, like when he pulled out a baseball bat or put on sunglasses. It is a very unpredictable and extremely effective power because it does not follow normal rules of physics. With this form, Luffy defeated Kaido, who was called the strongest creature in the world. And let's not forget that before Gear 5, he had already mastered the 3 forms of haki at high levels. Observation haki at an advanced level, which allowed him to see the future in the fight against Katakuri. Armament haki at an advanced level, where he learned Ryu and Wano, being able to destroy from within. Advanced Conqueror's haki, which he also used against Kaido. Luffy literally checked all the power-up boxes he could. Result? As of today, Luffy is a recognized emperor, a Yonkou, and has a bounty of 3 billion, standing among the strongest characters in the world. But what more can be expected from Luffy in terms of power? Well, here's the curious part. Possibly very little. Regarding new abilities, Luffy stated that in his very Gear 5, it's like the peak, the freest and most powerful form he desired. The idea of a 6th gear has been speculated by many fans, but there are many people who say this doesn't make sense and that it's most likely not going to happen. Instead, they say Luffy's progression would be to master what has already been awakened. For example, perfecting that 5th gear they used against Kaido, and there we saw him have certain issues as he ran out of energy quickly. He aged a little for a few seconds by pushing the limits with the whole time thing, and it's speculated that over time, Luffy will learn to use his Nika form much more efficiently without losing so much stamina. Perhaps he will develop new moves within the 5th gear, new ways to attack, because with his cartoon body, literally the limit is imagination, and we already saw him make a giant fist the size of an island against Kaido. He could invent, I don't know, a mode where he permanently turns the entire environment into rubber or even faster attacks, but I insist, these are variations within his current power. Regarding Haki, Luffy already possesses the top level. At most, he will continue refining it. He could improve his future sight to the level of Katakuri or more, his future sight to the level of Shanks or more. His Conqueror's Haki might reach the finesse of Shanks as well, who has a Conqueror's Haki so powerful that it can intimidate an admiral without even touching. Learning that kind of control, but essentially there is no new Haki to discover or anything. It's about strengthening what he has already achieved. The story places Luffy in a curious position. He is already one of the strongest, but he still has formidable enemies to defeat, mainly Blackbeard and Admiral Akainu. Additionally, there is talk of the enigmatic possible final villain, Emu, from the world government. How will Luffy fight if he is already at his peak? Well, the answer would lie more in strategy, the conditions of the fight, and the inherent willpower factor. Luffy is the heir to the will of D, and his Nika fruit has a mythical liberator component. It is possible that at the climax, Luffy will reach an even higher spiritual mental state. No tangible power-up as such, but a conviction so absolute that his Conqueror's Haki becomes unstoppable. For example, if he faces Emu, who might have some divine power or an ancient weapon, Luffy would need all his creativity and determination to overcome. What if it is said that Luffy will not keep breaking the power meter with something new? Well, they say the plot no longer requires it. At this point, the audience knows that Luffy is capable of facing anyone. If Oda introduced a Gear 6 or an extra transformation, it might feel repetitive and unjustified. Also, Luffy says that his Nika is his peak, so we'll trust that this peak is enough. The only thing that could be interesting is to see Luffy use the 5th gear creatively in different situations. For example, using his Toon Force fighting style to counter Blackbeard's unusual powers, who has the Darkness and Earthquake fruit, a devastating combination. Or let's imagine Luffy fighting against Akainu. The magma is deadly, but maybe with the 5th gear, Luffy does something crazy like turning Akainu's magma into rubber for an instant. If his power can affect elemental abilities, which we still don't know, it's theoretical territory. And another issue mentioned is that now Luffy is a mythical Zoan, which usually comes with the fruit's own will. In his case, the spirit of Nika, the god of freedom, seems to resonate with him, but there could be more mysteries about that fruit, that Luffy unravels some special ability linked to bringing the Dance of Liberation, or something like that, which Luffy could reproduce. This is more about narrative and mysticism than a power-up for fighting, but it could manifest as a super symbolic final technique that defeats the final antagonist. In terms of story logic, Luffy is destined to surpass all his predecessors, including Roger. In the end, Luffy will be the strongest and freest man in the world, the king of the pirates. He is on that path. There will be no one above Luffy in the end, not even Blackbeard or Im, as they will be defeated. In fact, it is expected that Luffy will do what Roger could not, probably overthrow the oppressive world government by igniting the dawn of freedom. His fruit is literally the embodiment of freedom through laughter and imagination. So more than these new power-ups, we will see Luffy using his current abilities in ingenious ways to fulfill that liberating role. For example, a powerful image would be Luffy using his giant elastic body to protect his allies from a catastrophic attack, or him laughing in the middle of the final battle, inspiring everyone. On a pure combat level, we definitely expect Luffy to face Blackbeard, a complicated rival because the Yami Yami nullifies fruits and also has the power of the earthquake, but perhaps with this 5th gear and superior Haki, this can be countered, and obviously it is expected that he will defeat Akainu, settling scores for what happened to Ace. These victories would not require a new gear, but probably a combination of everything he has learned, Conqueror's Haki, and Nika's creativity. Kamushi is a fighter. He might be the exception where Luffy has to surpass his limits once more, but they say they don't believe it will translate into a 6th gear. Rather, it would be Luffy pushing himself to the ultimate extreme of the 5th gear, perhaps risking his life in the process. In conclusion, Luffy has already reached the peak of the mountain in terms of tangible power-ups. His task right now is to reign over that peak. This means improving his level of control over Gear 5, so he can fight longer without getting exhausted and continue strengthening his Haki to legendary levels. That his Conqueror's Haki is so powerful that no one with a weak will can even get close, for example. We won't see a new crazy transformation, but what he already has is so versatile that it can still surprise us a lot. Luffy has basically become a cartoon character fighting in a relatively serious world, and that opens up a range of unpredictable comedic and epic moments. And the best part is that even though he's overpowered, Luffy is still very vulnerable if he's careless. His 5th gear has the drawback of energy consumption, so all the final battles will still have tension, because no matter how strong he is, there are opponents like Teach who could have tricks up their sleeve that could put him in trouble. But let's be realistic, Luffy will end up being the strongest character in One Piece, period. He will surpass even the legendary Roger in feats, because he will achieve what Roger did not. By then, his bounty will surely reflect that greatness. We can imagine that it slightly exceeds Roger's, perhaps around 5,600,000,000 berries, nodding to Gomu, which is 5 and 6 in Japanese. Although the figure is the least important, it is symbolic to think that Luffy will be recognized worldwide not only as the king of the pirates, but as the man who defeated the most fearsome enemies of the era. At this point, there would be no power-up to seek. His true strength would lie in the alliance of his power with his friends and his unbreakable inherited will. Each Straw Hat has their own path of growth, defined both by their ambitions and the narrative of One Piece. Some, like Luffy or Zoro, have already reached or are very close to reaching their maximum potential and only need to refine details. Others, like Nami and Usopp, might still gain 1 or 2 more tricks up their sleeve, but without stepping out of their role of intellect and support. Characters like Sanji, Franky, or Robin, who received recent upgrades, would consolidate those advancements, perhaps with something extra, technological in Franky's case, hockey in Robin and Sanji's case, and for their part, they might not change radically from that end, but that does not diminish their value in what they contribute to the team. Blackbeard is a very curious character because he is the only one who has managed to have 2 devil fruits to this day, and we fans are so crazy that we think 2 are not enough, as he will have 3. Obviously, many theories have come out, people talking about him having 1 fruit, people talking about him having another. And today I'm gonna bring you what is the best theory about Blackbeard's fruit. Also mention something very important, and that is this video will discuss things revealed in chapters 4 and 1155 of the One Piece manga, and also add that several years ago I published this same theory, but with data that was proven and confirmed at that time. Today many have changed. Many things have been revealed, and much of the information we have has completely changed, so the theory remains, but this time changing certain arguments and reinforcing a lot. So let's go directly to what the 3rd fruit of Marshall D. Teach, also known as Blackbeard, is. Give the video a like and subscribe, as these videos take a lot of work, and let me know in the comments what you're doing if you've put the video on in the background while doing something. You know I love reading your comments. Well, let's start directly to talk about his mysterious 3rd devil fruit. Yes, that extra fruit that we all suspect he is going to eat if he hasn't already eaten it secretly off camera and we haven't seen it. And it's that Blackbeard is not just any pirate, he is the pirate, full of mysteries, tricks, and has been keeping us puzzled for many years. But this character has something very curious. 3 skulls on his flag, 3 pistols on his belt, 3 braids in his beard. This man has a fetish with the number 3 bigger than Zoro's with Sake, or mine with Nami. And when I see a pattern repeating in One Piece, like this 3, I already smell that there's a clear foreshadowing. So the $1 million question is, what would be Blackbeard's 3rd devil fruit? To this day, we know that Teach ate the Yami Yami no Mi, which is the Darkness Logia, a very broken fruit that nullifies powers, turns you into a human black hole, and he has also consumed the Gura Gura no Mi, which is the Paramecia of earthquakes, stolen from Edward Newgate at Marineford. No small feat, and we see that he has absolute darkness in one hand and total destruction in the other. So what is missing for the trio? Well, a Zoan, obviously, since it would be the Logia plus the Paramecia, and the Zoan would be missing a complete combo. And knowing Oda, it surely won't be just any Zoan, it won't be a Zoan of a cat probably, but rather a mythical Zoan, a legendary Zoan, one of those Zoans that when we see it, we'll get up from our chairs and applaud. Many theories have been floating around, like the 3-headed Cerberus, or a hippopotamus, or that he was going to take Kaido's, Marco's, or even Moria's. Although Moria's is not a Zoan, it was also part of the theory. Let's say a whole zoo applied to Teach. Some made a lot of sense at the time, others were stranger than a Denden Mushi with Wi-Fi, but since we entered the final saga of the manga, today chapter 1155, Oda has given us one of those brutal hints that makes one of those theories stand out much more than the others as the most epic and logical candidate. And this would be the mythical Zone model Kraken, inspired by the legendary figure of Davy Jones. Yes, you heard right, Blackbeard turning into a mythological kraken, the tentacled sea monster of pirate legends. And this does sound very crazy, very exaggerated, and it's perfect. As I said, I published this theory several years ago and gave you several arguments, but many of these no longer apply, many have changed, and there is a lot of new information we need to add. and I believe that with the latest chapters of the manga, this has gained a lot of strength, and now you will understand why. I know that maybe there are many people who are not convinced yet. Well, don't worry, hold on, because I'm going to break down all the old and new arguments that point to this theory. And along the way, we'll have some laughs watching some things, as we'll see what past elements fit like a glove with the Kraken theme, what old ideas needed correcting with what we knew up to chapter 1155, and how recent revelations in the manga, including the bombshell that Rock's Deed Zebek is Teach's father, and the appearance of the mythical Davy Jones in the conversation, make this theory go from possible to entirely very possible. So let's go and dive into the ultimate theory of Blackbeard's third fruit. But before we plunge into the world of octopuses, krakens, and all that, let's put into context the theories that the community had been handling until relatively recently about Teach's third fruit. Because believe me, there's been everything and for all tastes, a buffet of mythological animals. The first one we are going to discuss is the Cerberus, which is the three-headed dog. This was one of the first theories that became very, very popular. Why? Well, because of the darn number 3. 3 skulls on Blackbeard's flag. Cerberus was the guardian of the underworld, and Blackbeard is practically the darkest and most demonic lord in One Piece right now, with the permission of Imu, whom we haven't seen, and it fit well with the symbolism. Teach with a mythical Zoan model, Cerberus could explain his 3 personalities or the possibility of having 3 fruits. Some even thought he already had it before, and that thanks to it he could withstand eating the other 2 fruits without exploding. The idea is quite interesting on paper. Imagine Blackbeard transforming into a giant 3-headed dog and spewing darkness, earthquakes. It would be a very diabolical image, but honestly, over time, doubts began to arise. Would Oda really give Teach the Cerberus fruit just for the joke about the 3 heads? Many, including myself, thought that perhaps it was too simple or too strange, and that the 3 heads on the flag might refer to something else. 3 hearts, maybe? Well, now we will go with that. But in addition, there is a very important thing to discard this theory, and it is that we have seen that the character Shamrock had a sword that had also consumed the Cerberus fruit, and as we know, there is only 1 fruit of each type in One Piece. That is to say, there will not be another Cerberus fruit, which is why this theory is obviously discarded, because I don't see Blackbeard trying to end the life of a sword to get that fruit. The second theory we are going to discuss is the hippopotamus theory, and this theory mainly arose because of Eiichiro Oda himself and his quirks. For those who don't know, Oda usually assigns representative animals to the characters. In the Straw Hat crew, for example, Luffy is a monkey. Well, can you guess what animal Oda said Blackbeard would be? Bingo, a hippopotamus. Just like that, and in some illustrations and covers, in fact, he has drawn him with hippos just because. At first we were all like, what do you mean a hippo? But then you stop to think and you have that. Hippos, although they seem very gentle animals, are among the most dangerous and lethal animals in Africa. They kill more people per year than many known predators. In fact, it is the animal that kills the most per year, except for mosquitoes, which are insects. And in that, it resembles Teach, who is lethal and very violent. And wait, there's more. It turns out that hippos have 3 stomachs or 3 stomach chambers, which at the time set off alarms about the number 3 again. There were already people pulling out the theory calculator saying Teach equals hippo equals can eat 3 fruits without dying because they digest them separately. Well, they were certainly creative. The hippopotamus theory sounded so far-fetched that you didn't know whether to laugh or take it seriously. Because on one hand, it's true that Oda could have been hinting at the hippopotamus, drawing it with Blackbeard. The connection of 3 is there too, with the theme of the 3 stomachs. But let's be realistic, a hippopotamus, no matter how violent it is, doesn't have the epic level 1 expects from the final villain or their secret weapon. Let's compare the image of Luffy fighting a hippopotamus Blackbeard with, I don't know, Luffy against a dragon like Kaido, Luffy fighting a phoenix with the theory that he would steal Marco's fruit, or even with a kraken. Well, obviously it doesn't quite fit. Moreover, the powers of the hippopotamus fruit would be brute strength, powerful jaws, and not much else. Oda didn't hype us for so many years with the mystery of Teach for the revelation to be. Oh look, he transforms into Moto Moto from Madagascar, so although it has its basis in some curious hints, I would rule out the hippopotamus as the 3rd fruit. Thank you for participating, hippopotamus. Go back to the river. Then there was another theory that he would steal Kaido's fruit, the dragon fruit. And during the Wano arc, there were those who bet that Teach would appear at the end, like the ultimate opportunist, as always, and take the Wo Nomi dragon model from Kaido after his defeat. After all, Blackbeard is a scavenger pirate who takes advantage of situations. He already did it in Marineford by stealing the Gora Gora. Why not in Wano with Kaido's? And a dragon would fit as a super powerful mythological zone, giving Teach the trifecta: darkness, earthquakes, and dragonfire. Almost invincible. Sounds like a final boss in an RPG. A dragon that generates earthquakes, black holes. Basically, it seems like a boss straight out of the Navy's worst nightmare. Now then, this theory cooled off very quickly, and Oda dismissed it with facts. First, because, spoiler, Teach did not appear in the Wano arc, nor was he needed, as he was busy with his own matters. Second, because if he had done it, he probably would have gone for more strategic things like the poneglyphs or some bigger plan before going to fight for Kaido's fruit. And third, and most importantly, Luffy already fought against Kaido and his dragon fruit throughout Wano. It would be anticlimactic and repetitive for the final enemy, who would be Teach, to have the same fruit, especially one as significant as Kaido's. Oda usually doesn't repeat those identical battles. We need novelty in the final confrontation. Not Luffy versus a Dragon 2 now with Blackbeard. So as epic as a Dragon Teach sounds, it's practically impossible for it to happen. Wano ended, Kaido sank into the magma with his fruit, and Blackbeard didn't show up there. So we dismissed the dragon theory with a 0% probability. Another interesting theory was that he would steal Marco's fruit, the Phoenix. This theory emerged post-Wano, when Marco was alive and kicking, but a bit directionless. And it was said, what if Teach, to complete his set, hunts Marco and takes the Tori Tori no Mi Phoenix model from him, a black Phoenix, because it would be with Teach's darkness, surely turning the yellow flames to a black color. It would be a spectacle, and the Phoenix fruit also provides immense regeneration and resistance. Exactly Teach's weak point, as he constantly complains about pain. Having crazy regeneration would compensate for the disadvantage of the Yami Yami, which makes him suffer double damage. Hey, it would be great for Teach, because being able to fly like a phoenix to escape or attack from the sky would be incredible. The Phoenix theory had its charm. It would be a top mythological area, well known but not overexposed, since we saw Marco fight several times, but we don't know every technique in detail. Drawbacks? Mainly that it implied killing Marco, a beloved character, and there was no clear sign that Teach was after him. In fact, Teach already had his revenge with the remnants of the Whitebeard pirates in the Payback War, where he defeated Marco, but he didn't kill him then. After that, Teach seemed more interested in other targets, Amazon Lily, the Road Poneglyphs, and indeed, up to chapter 95, there is no sign that Teach cares about Marco at this point. Marco is still alive and free, so even though I like the idea of a Black Phoenix in theory, nothing has materialized to support it, added to the fact that Oda prefers to surprise with new fruits in the major villains. We've already seen quite a bit of the Phoenix one, and I don't give it much chance either. Another interesting idea was to steal Moria's fruit, and this is interesting because of the recent story. We know that Teach received Gecko Moria in Hachinosu, his pirate island. After the reverie, Moria appeared to take revenge for Absalom, and basically Teach told him, "Join me or die." Since then, Moria has been missing in action. Many speculated that Teach might have killed Moria and taken his shadow fruit. Advantages? Well, the Kage Kage could combine in very shady ways with the Yami Yami. Imagine Teach creating total darkness, without light, and using the shadows of his enemies in that gloom, easily stealing them and manipulating them at will. It would enhance the Kage Kage to the maximum, because darkness creates the best shadows. It sounds terrifying. Moreover, stealing powerful fruits is precisely the criminal option of Teach's crew. They already said it in the manga, they are hunting users to take their devil fruits. But here's a cold bucket of water. If Teach is gonna have a third fruit, it makes sense for it to be a Zoan, not another Paramecia. He already has a Paramecia, the Gura Gura, and he already broke the rule of only one power with two different fruits. Giving him a second Paramecia instead of a Zoan would leave us lacking in the famous trio. And Oda is a fan of balanced trios. On the other hand, Moria is still alive, and if Teach didn't kill him on the spot, it's because he either wants him for something, information, a temporary alliance, or who knows, or simply Oda has plans to include Moria in some future plot, perhaps taking revenge on Teach. How ironic that would be. In the end, we don't see Teach showing off the Ichibukai zombie abilities around. Moreover, a Paramecia like that, although it would be useful, does not have that legendary aura we would want for Teach's last fruit. We also discard it. Another very interesting one was the heavy no Mi model Yamata no Orochi. Orochi's from Wano. This was much more niche, but someone mentioned it, and after all, it is a mythological Zoan with a lot of regeneration. You had to cut off 8 heads of Orochi for him to really kick the bucket. Now imagine Blackbeard with 8 snake heads, plus his own head, making 9 in total, and being a bearded Hydra attacking Luffy. Can you imagine? I mean, visually it's brutal and would give him incredible endurance. You'd have to kill him 9 times, almost like the typical video game where you defeat the final boss and he appears in a new form. And since Orochi was useless and his fruit was quite underutilized, he only used it to scream and little else. Many fans thought that Oda could recycle that fruit, giving it to someone truly powerful. What is the problem? Well, similar to the case of Kaido, Wano ended, Orochi died, burned, and his Akuma no Mi would have been reborn somewhere. Where? No idea, but after Wano, it was not mentioned again. It could be around somewhere, yes, but it would be a stretch for Teach to obtain it and have it off screen, bringing him or his subordinates back to Wano just to look for that fruit. It would be a bit anticlimactic. And besides, narratively, what connects Teach with Orochi or with that fruit? Well, nothing really. It was just the idea of a zone completely underutilized. Personally, I would have liked to see more of Teach with that fruit than with the previous ones, because at least it's mythological and would add some intrigue. But there are no clear indications, neither before nor after the Wano arc, that point to that. So interesting, but unlikely. And okay, with this we have the review done. As you can see at this point, many of these theories have lost strength or have been indirectly dismissed by the story. Cerberus was left without new support, and with the revelation that the fruit is already with the sword, well, complicated. The hippopotamus Zoan was a curious nod, but not very spectacular for the climax of One Piece. Kaido's dragon was already faced, Marco's phoenix didn't happen, and Marco is still alive. The shadows of Moria don't fit because it's Paramecia, and Moria is still alive. The snake of Orochi got a bit lost in the post-Wano limbo. So what then? We arrive at the octopus/kraken theory, which was there, somewhat hidden among many others, and suddenly has gained a lot of traction to be the correct one thanks to new clues. As I said before, this theory has existed for quite some time, as I published it about 3 or 4 years ago. But oh my, now everything fits together like a well-made 1,000-piece puzzle, and I'm gonna tell you why the Kraken is the perfect candidate for Blackbeard's third fruit and how Oda has been dropping hints about this from the beginning, only to hit us with the confirmation in the final saga. Pay attention, here comes the juicy part, the clue of the number 3 and Teach's strange body. Blackbeard with tentacles. Let's start with the basic and obvious, the number 3 following Blackbeard everywhere. I've mentioned it before, but let's delve a little deeper. Teach has 3 skulls on his pirate flag, which is very unusual. Normally it's 1 skull, but 3 complete skulls. Only he has that. After the time skip, Oda decided to draw him with 3 braids hanging from his beard. An aesthetic detail, yes, but by now we know that in One Piece, few things are innocent coincidences. And to top it off, Teach is always armed with 3 pistols. Are you gonna tell me that all this is not on purpose? Blackbeard is the walking number 3. For a long time, fans have interpreted this as he will have 3 powers, 3 personalities, or souls, or something like that. Well, what creature in nature also has the number 3 prominently in its organism? The octopus. Yes, a common octopus. That mollusk with tentacles that we see in takoyaki salad has 3 hearts beating inside it, not 1 or 2. 3 real hearts. A main heart that pumps the blood, blue by the way, octopus blood is blue, and 2 auxiliary hearts dedicated to pumping blood to the gills. 3 engines within the same body. Tell me if the biology of this creature isn't amazing. Now, tell me if it doesn't remind you a bit of the crazy idea of a body with 3 souls, or 3 energies, or 3 devil fruits coexisting. Could it be that Teach literally has, thanks to the Zoan, 3 hearts, 1 for each devil fruit he possesses? It sounds like something out of a conspiracy theory, but biologically an octopus has them. 1 heart for each gill, plus the central one, so Teach's connection with the number 3 might not come from a hellhound or a gluttonous hippopotamus, but from an octopus with its triple heart. But wait, it doesn't end there. Octopuses have more characteristics that are very curious. Did you know that octopuses are among the strangest animals in the world? Seriously, their physiology is out of this world. They have, for example, a super developed but distributed nervous system, as 2/3 of their neurons are in their tentacles, not in the head, and that means an octopus's tentacles have a mind of their own in a way. They can make movements and even basic decisions without the central brain completely controlling them. In fact, if you cut off an octopus's tentacle, the tentacle can continue moving for a while, reacting to stimuli or even trying to grab food and bring it to where the octopus's mouth would be. In other words, a separated part of the body acts almost like an independent organism for a time. A strange body, literally, and any One Piece fan right now will be thinking of that famous phrase from Marco during the Marineford War. That guy Teach has always had a strange body. When Marco shouted to be careful because Blackbeard didn't have a normal body, that he was different. That phrase has tortured our minds since then. What on earth does Teach have in his body to be different? Some said, well, he has his Siamese brothers inside. Another, that he has multiple personalities. Another, that he ate a mythical fruit before. What if the answer is precisely that Teach had already become a humanoid octopus thanks to a Zoan, and that's why his internal physiology is different, allowing him to do things impossible for others? Marco, as a doctor and as an old crew member of the same ship, perhaps noticed with his instincts that Teach's issue was not just gluttony, but that there was something anatomically anomalous, a strange body, just like an octopus tentacle that keeps moving on its own, something strange, foreign to the accumulation. It's just that we know Teach never sleeps, since Baggy mentioned in that flashback in chapter 90, something like, hey, did you know that Teach has never slept once in his life? He's a monster, and who doesn't sleep or sleeps very little? Again, our friends the octopuses. Scientific studies show that octopuses sleep very little in short naps, and in very safe environments, and they do it almost with one eye open, so to speak. An average octopus can sleep only a couple of hours in total per day, and in an intermittent way. Basically, they have insomnia. And Teach? Well, the same. Coincidence? Another one. One would think that so many coincidences with an octopus are just too much. Also, let's consider Teach's main weakness. The guy takes hits like nobody's business. Unlike many Logia who avoid damage by turning into their element, Teach cannot become intangible with the Yami Yami. On the contrary, his fruit absorbs the attacks. He feels them all multiplied. Every time he gets hit, he screams in pain a lot. Let's remember when Luffy in Impelled Down punched him in anger over Ace. Teach rolled on the ground in exaggerated pain. Or when Magellan poisoned him and he almost kicked the bucket. Teach himself admits that the pain feels twice as much with his power. And what is the body of an octopus like? Soft, vulnerable, and boneless. An octopus has no shell or skeleton. It's practically all muscle and soft skin. They can easily suffer cuts or damage. They are not animals made to take hits, but to avoid them. They flee, camouflage, spit ink, and leave. An octopus on land would be clumsy and slow. Sound familiar? Teach is a bit slow and clumsy, and in his hand-to-hand fights, he doesn't dodge at all. He takes attacks head-on, and certainly, Teach behaves like an octopus out of water. Teach gets tired quickly. He has been seen panting after certain efforts. And let's remember that despite being relatively young, since he is 40 years old, he is 1 year younger than Shanks and younger than Doflamingo, others of his generation. This would fit with the biological note that the central heart of the octopus stops when it swims. Octopuses get tired quickly if they are in constant motion. That's why they usually crawl or stay still. Teach isn't exactly the most athletic, is he? He prefers to plan, ambush, and use his powers from a distance to avoid long hand-to-hand fights where he gets exhausted. All these physical disadvantages of Teach, the intense pain, low speed, questionable endurance, could be attributed to his body having octopus-like qualities. In other words, his hypothetical Kraken fruit would have given him tremendous powers at the cost of a more fragile body. It would be a nice balance to be able to use 3 fruits. His octopus body would penalize him in durability, a disadvantage we have already seen. And something very curious about octopuses is that they are animals with a quite surprising regenerative capacity. In nature, an octopus can lose a tentacle due to a predator attack or even self-amputate it to escape, similar to what lizards do with their tails. But the impressive thing is that they can completely regenerate a lost arm in a matter of weeks or months, and they not only regenerate the flesh and skin, but they also regenerate nerves, suckers, blood vessels, and even the nerve ganglia inside the arm. The new arm is completely functional, as if nothing had happened. How do they do it? Well, they have stem cells and biological processes that reactivate tissue formation. In fact, there are scientific studies where it is observed that the new arm starts as a small bud and gradually takes the complete shape of the original tentacle. It's just that when we see this and add that Teach has a problem, suffering twice the pain due to his Yami Yami, it makes it so that despite feeling pain, the damage is not as evident since he is able to regenerate very quickly. Something that would have an absolutely brutal power, having incredible regeneration, having the Yami Yami to nullify any fruit and do many things with the black holes, and have all the total power with the fruit capable of destroying the world, the amnesia of the earthquakes. And if you think Oda hasn't left visual clues of octopuses around Teach, I'll tell you that there are fans with a keen eye who point out curious details. Where Marco mentions something about a strange body, a subordinate appears with an octopus on his head, an intentional nod, or am I maybe getting paranoid? Maybe Oda drew that octopus to laugh in our faces, but we will never know until the story ends. What is undeniable is that Oda loves octopuses, and when the Straw Hats fall as spies, we see them fall on an octopus that acts as balloons. Or even Fishman Island, where we have a friendly kraken named Tsurume, which Luffy tames. Oda always has octopuses appearing in his work. Sometimes for funny things, sometimes for crucial things. Is it a coincidence that precisely the final saga brings us these references to Davy Jones, which we will talk about now, and that the most solid theory points to it being the fruit of a kraken octopus for Teach? I would say that Oda has been playing tricks, but leaving breadcrumbs all the time. Let's quickly recap this section because it is very important. Teach and octopuses share a lot of peculiarities. The number 3, which is everywhere, and the octopus has 3 hearts. Teach has a strange body, and octopuses have tentacles with their own movement. Teach does not sleep, and octopuses sleep very little, or almost not at all. Teach feels a lot of pain, and octopuses have a very soft body without any kind of shell, and if it turns out that Blackbeard has been half octopus for years, and we didn't know it, many theorize that Teach could have already consumed the octopus Zoan before joining the Whitebeard pirates. Could a young Teach have found the kraken fruit and kept its power a secret for decades? It's difficult, but not impossible. Teach played the role of weak and harmless to Whitebeard's crew for 20 years, waiting for the opportunity to steal the Yammy Yammy. No one suspected him, and if he took advantage of that low profile to never reveal his Zoan transformation, maybe he never needed to transform or did it secretly somewhere. The other option is that he doesn't have it yet, but is actively searching for it to complete the set. We know that his crew is hunting for powerful fruits. He risked it at Amazon Lily for Boa Hancock's Mero Mero, for example. He sent his Nakamas to steal Absalom's Suke Suke, and if on his personal agenda is to capture the current possessor of the Kraken fruit, or find it if it is hidden in some mythical place. After all, mythical Zoan fruits of legendary animals are not easy to obtain. They are often tied to very big stories. An example would be the Nika fruit with Luffy. For now, no one known has revealed the story, which is great because it leaves the door open for Teach to surprise us in the great final battle, showing a monstrous transformation never seen before. Imagine the situation, Luffy and Teach in their decisive confrontation, both already wounded and exhausted, Luffy perhaps in Gear 5 Nika unleashing all his power, and Teach says, "Did you think you had seen it all, Straw Hat?" And boom, he transforms into a gigantic kraken, a black tentacled beast splattered with darkness. It would be cinematic, and now we come to the icing on the cake, the connection with Davy Jones. Because everything about the octopuses was very powerful, but what elevates it from a possible theory to an almost confirmed theory? Well, Oda has recently introduced Davy Jones into the plot, in fact in a very specific way, and we see that it points directly to Blackbeard, the legacy of Rox D, Zebek and Davy Jones, direct foreshadowing to the Kraken. If you're up to date with the manga until chapter 1000, you'll know that Oda dropped a historical bomb. Rox D. Zebek, the legendary captain of the Rox Pirates, turned out to be the father of Marshal D. Teach. Although fans had suspected this for a while, because of the ship called Saber of Zebek and other things we saw in the manga, seeing it confirmed left us all shocked. Blackbeard is the son of another infamous D, heir to the will of a man who wanted to be the king of the world. Blackbeard had on his ship the son of Gold D. Roger and the son of his rival, Rox D. Zebek. What an irony of fate, and this adds another layer of depth to Teach. Not only is he evil due to personal ambition, but he carries the blood of Rox's legacy, the pirate who almost overthrew the world government in Gotham. And why does this matter for our Kraken theory? Well, because in chapter 1055, amid all the revelations of the flashback, we learned something very juicy. Rox D. Zebek was a fan and admirer of Davy Jones. Yes, you read that right. In the flashback, Rox sneaks into Mary Guiz right into Imusama's room and tells the world leader to their face that he was a fan of Davy Jones. Just like that, and the series had gone decades without explicitly mentioning Davy Jones, as he had only been mentioned a couple of times. And suddenly Zebek, Teach's father, comes out saying he idolizes this guy. Coincidence? Is his foreshadowing as big as the elephant Zunesha? Oda never puts a legendary name in the mouth of a crucial character at this point without any reason. Why remind us of Davy Jones now? Well, let's unravel this. First, a bit of context about Davy Jones in One Piece. In our world, Davy Jones is sailor folklore. The demon of the sea, the master of Davy Jones's locker, which would be the seabed where the dead live. In One Piece, Oda also adapted that name for the Davy Back Fight, a legendary pirate game where crews wager members and flags. It is said in the manga that the game originated from a story where pirates made offerings to Davy Jones to recover their lost comrades. I mean, Davy Jones exists in the mythology of One Piece as a pirate or a legendary entity associated with the sea and gambling games between crews. His face or anything has never been shown, just the concept. Now, after this, it seems that Davy Jones was a real pirate from ancient history, maybe from centuries ago, who knows? He could even be from the Void Century or something like that. And we also know that Zebek held him in high regard. We have Rox who admired Davy Jones, and then we have Teach who admires Rox enough to name his ship Saber of Zebek and follow his will of chaos. Admiration is also inherited. I'm not saying that Teach worships Davy Jones on a personal altar, but it's very likely that he knows the stories of Davy Jones, either thanks to his father, or ancient documents, or simply the pirate culture passed down. Teach is quite a pirate history geek. Let's remember that he knew about the existence of the Yami Yami no Mi and that he was searching for it for years, and that Eiichiro Oda himself said that if he had a profession in the real world, it would be archaeologist. If Oda links rocks with Davy Jones in this way, it's almost like he's shouting at us, pay attention, because the legend of Davy Jones is going to play a very important role in the final plot. And who better to embody this legend in the present era than Marshall D. Teach? Think about the parallels. Luffy embodies the will of Joy Boy Nika, which was that of the Dawn, the smiling liberator and all that, and Teach could embody that of Rocks, Davy Jones, the Dark Legend, the Cursed Conqueror. In fact, it would be something like the sun against the darkness, Free Surface against oppressive depths, Joy Boy against Davy Jones. It's almost poetic. Now, how does the Kraken fit into this? Well, because in popular imagery, Davy Jones is strongly associated with the Kraken. Look at the one from Pirates of the Caribbean, for instance. Davy Jones, with his tentacle beard and octopus face, controlled the Kraken and used it to sink ships. I'm not saying that Oda is going to copy that from Davy Jones, but it's quite a coincidence that the Kraken fruit theory fits with Teach, and suddenly Davy Jones becomes relevant to the story. It's as if Oda had thought, if I'm going to make Teach transform into the Kraken at the climax, I'd better start introducing the concept of Davy Jones so that fans can connect the dots and feel the classic pirate theme. Because let's remember Oda's words. One Piece, despite everything, is still a pirate story. And what is more classic pirate than the legend of Davy Jones, the Flying Dutchman, the Kraken that devours ships in the storm? Oda is going to give us mythological piracy straight to the vein for the end, I'm sure. With Rocks in the flashback, we learned that there were even real Davy backfights organized by him to recruit crew members. Rocks played Davy Jones's game to strengthen his crew. What a great detail, and this is something to think about. I wouldn't be surprised if Teach, as Zebek's son, also uses a Davy backfive at some point in the current story for some twisted purpose. It would close the circle. Imagine if Teach challenges Luffy to a Davy backfive at some critical point, betting on something very big. Robin to read the poneglyphs, some road poneglyph, or the life of an ally. With Teach you never know. It would be a tremendous nod to the tradition of Davy Jones and his father Rocks. And if in the middle of this final game, Teach reveals his crane form, he would literally be honoring the legacy of Davy Jones in person. Returning to Davy Jones himself, we don't know if he will appear physically. A flashback of him? A ghost. A tale told by Brook? It would be fun. But the important thing is the influence of that figure on Teach. Davy Jones was greedy and cursed. And Blackbeard is greed personified. He wants the One Piece. He wants power, he wants to rule, and he wants all the strong fruits. He wants to be king of everything, of the world. More greedy, impossible. The curse could be his inability to sleep. I would bet on the impossibility of having a normal life due to the anomaly of his body. It could even foreshadow that Teach ends up with a tragic fate, sunk or destroyed by his own greed. Imagine that Luffy doesn't kill him, but after defeating him, Teach suffers some karmic punishment, being swallowed by the same darkness he controls, sent to the abyss, to his own Davy Jones's locker. Curious that Rocks disappeared, sunk on God Valley Island, right? Coincidence? I don't think so. Let's suppose that Blackbeard is the son of Rocks, inherited his will, Rock. Rocks admired Davy Jones, the pirate of the depths. Therefore, Teach is the living embodiment of that dark and legendary line of piracy. And here comes the final connection. The mythical Zoan of the Kraken would be the perfect element to materialize that connection in combat. With that fruit, Blackbeard literally becomes a legendary sea monster of gigantic proportions, capable of sinking ships with his tentacles and sowing terror in the sea. He would be Davy Jones in the new era. I can even imagine him modifying his human appearance. He already has that characteristic beard. Can you imagine if in hybrid or full form, tentacles come out as a beard? It would be an octopus beard moving on his face in the style of Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean. And who needs facial hair when you can have giant hanging squids? It would be very strange and incredible at the same time. Also, it fits with his last name Teach, which is from the real pirate Blackbeard, Edward Teach, who in the fiction of other media has sometimes been mixed a lot with the legend of Davy Jones. Oda could be making a fantastic medley of pirate references. Blackbeard plus Davy Jones merged into a single character, Marshall D. Teach. It would only be missing for his Zebek saber ship to become the new Wandering Landais, sailing shrouded in darkness and followed by a tamed Kraken, or being the Kraken himself. At this rate, let's not rule out that in the final battle, Teach summons a dark storm at sea. Luffy has to jump from that sunny from the sun to hit him, and silhouettes of tentacles are seen emerging from the darkness. But if all this weren't enough, think about the symbolism. Luffy is the rubber man, the man who became the sun god Nika, liberator, associated with the day, light, hope. Teach would be the man of darkness who becomes the demon of the sea, the Kraken, Davy Jones, the oppressor associated with the night, the depths, fear. One reigns in the sky of free imagination, the other in the dark waters of greed. The confrontation between them would have rich thematic layers, Luffy bringing to light the man who comes from the abyssal darkness. There could even be a big moment, like taking the battle to the sea. We know that fruit users cannot swim, but if you throw a giant kraken, it might try to fight by submerging half its body in the water, relying on its monstrous endurance, dragging Luffy into the water to drown him. It would be an incredible madness, and Luffy may be using his Onika Sun powers to, I don't know, evaporate water or something creative. This is already maximum speculation, but come on, the imagination flies with this idea. With the narrative and visual clues in hand, it's not hard to get on board or on the octopus of this theory. I repeat it concisely, Blackbeard has a huge thematic connection with octopuses, the Kraken. Oda has given biological hints of the number 3, the strange body, the insomnia, which fit perfectly, and now he gives us the direct reference to Davy Jones through Teach's father, almost shouting to us that the legacy of that cursed pirate will live on in someone, and that someone reeks of Blackbeard. In the upcoming chapters, we might see even more signs, maybe someone mentioning that Teach is after a sunken treasure of Davy Jones or something like that. A flashback of young Teach studying sea legends? I can already imagine anything. I'm super hyped. So, summarizing this whole theory festival, Marshall D. Teach's third devil fruit is going to be, or already is, a mythological form, model Kraken, legendary giant octopus. This fruit would explain all the mysteries surrounding Blackbeard because he can have multiple powers without dying. 3 hearts for 3 fruits, lineage factor altered by the tune. Why his body is strange, according to Marco the Phoenix, he would have octopus biology with semi-autonomous parts. Perhaps more than one spirit in the body. Why he never sleeps, a characteristic of octopuses. Why he feels so much pain and is somewhat clumsy. Disadvantages of being a humanoid octopus. Why he wants that fruit for the regeneration aspect. And why Odal has surrounded it with the number 3 symbolically. It fits better than the straw hat on Luffy's head. And not only that, the Kraken fruit turns Blackbeard into the modern incarnation of Davy Jones, the myth of the Sea Terror pirate. Thanks to the revelation of Rox D. Zebek and his admiration for Davy Jones, we now know that this legend is relevant in the story. Teach, as the son of Rox, is practically destined to take up that mantle, and he would be the perfect final villain. A pirate who combines the worst of the land, earthquakes that destroy islands, the worst of the sky, darkness that swallows light, and the worst of the sea, a kraken that sinks ships. Who the hell is gonna stop a monster like that? Well, our dear Monkey D, who by then will be the other side of the coin, the sun god, with power over rubber, imagination, and perhaps the fire of liberation. Who knows? Clash of Titans guaranteed. Now, it is true that Oda can always troll us and come up with something totally unexpected, but honestly, if tomorrow a chapter came out confirming that Teach sprouts tentacles from his back and says, I have the Taco Taco no Mi model Kraken, no one who has followed these clues would be too surprised. Rather, we would shout, I knew it, while pulling our hair in excitement because it would be one of those glorious moments when Oda rewards years of foreshadowing, errors or outdated ideas from previous concepts. Well, we already saw that thinking about Cerberus's hippos, or that falls short of what we have now. This Kraken thing takes the best of each theory and unifies it for you. It gives you the 3-headed dog. It gives you the marine aspect of the hippopotamus. It gives you a mythological form like those of Kaido, Marco, or Orochi as original, but never seen before. It gives you a final villain totally terrifying in aesthetics and power, and on top of that, it connects with the meta history of Davy Jones. It's perfect. Personally, I love imagining people's reactions when it's revealed in the world of One Piece. The Marines shouting, what the hell is that and they're watching Teach in Kraken form ravaging a port. The Straw Hat's going completely crazy. Did he turn into a giant squid? Is it a Kraken? Luffy saying, it's like Tsurume, but uglier. It would be a moment worthy of a final saga, and Oda knows how to give us visual spectac. So people, start mentally preparing for Blackbeard with tentacles. It may sound crazy, but now everything is there and all the details point to it. All the old details, like the new revelations. If we turn out to be wrong, hey, at least we had fun putting this puzzle together. But I honestly believe it 100%. Blackbeard will be the mythological Kraken that rules the darkness in the seas. Just imagine the final battle. Luffy in Nika form, shining like the dawn, laughing, doing crazy rubber things. In front of him, Teach, in the hybrid form of the Kraken, with a dark aura, tentacles striking the ground, roaring, shouting. The two bearers of the will of Dai, the sun against the moon. It will be epic, terrifying, exciting, and when Luffy defeats him, because Luffy is going to defeat him, he would not only defeat the last great enemy, he would defeat the very legend of Davy Jones. He would free the world from the darkness of the abyss, bring the new dawn, and wow, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. And we're going to talk about the Ancient Kingdom. We all somewhat understand what the Ancient Kingdom was. It was a very powerful, very ancient civilization that existed during the Void Century and had technological power that was incredible. Technology that is even far more advanced than things we have seen today. This was even mentioned by a person already ahead of us, like Dr. Vegapunk. And while it's true we don't have much information about the Ancient Kingdom, we have enough to know this. We also know that this Ancient Kingdom was destroyed during the Void Century, probably by the world government, and they were enemies of them. But Eiichiro Oda, the creator of One Piece, has made sure to give us information about this ancient kingdom drop by drop over more than 1,000 chapters, without making the most important parts clear. Then a theory arises that could completely change everything we know about One Piece and everything we believe. And the theory suggests that maybe we are wrong, as the perception of the fandom in general is that the world government has always been the bad side and that the ancient kingdom was the good side, that they were the good ones, the ones who lost, and that those who won, well, they are the bad ones. So what if this is completely reversed? This is perhaps one of the craziest theories out there, but there are also arguments to consider this. The fact is that Oda, every time he has talked about the ancient kingdom, Joy Boy, or the world government, has made it clear that neither is good nor bad. He has not dared to commit, and a very clear case is when Vegapunk, who is telling us about the history he has discovered of the ancient kingdom, the Void Century and everything, we see that he doesn't take sides and says he doesn't dare to say who is the good one or who is the bad one, and he simply tells us a part of the story. And Oda has done this throughout the whole work. The thing is that if it really is something like we think, it would be very easy to make it clear from the first moment, since it is something that all the fandom assumes. That is to say, it wouldn't be a very drastic change for the work if they confirmed it, as it would simply be an ah. Okay, so we were right, but instead, Oda, as I said, has remained very distant from this, simply providing very little information and addressing other topics without mentioning if they are the good guys or the bad guys. So as I said, the theory says that the ancient kingdom would be the bad guys and that the world government would be the good guys, something that obviously, if true, would completely change the entire paradigm of the series. Now, does this make sense or is it just nonsense? Well, even though it may sound far-fetched, it could be something that makes sense, since the first argument used to justify this theory is precisely what I mentioned, and it's the little information that the author of One Piece has given from this kingdom, especially focusing on whether they were the good ones or the bad ones. We have it in our heads right now that the world government are the bad ones because we see them doing negative things, but it is also true that we are seeing it from one point of view, and perhaps they are doing it for a greater good, even though obviously their actions would not be justified, but we could understand the why they do them. And Oda throughout the work has made sure to show us that there are neither good guys nor bad guys, since not even the pirates are the bad ones, using the Straw Hats as an example, or the Marines are the good ones, using as an example people like Akainu, who act in a very brutal way. And in fact, Doflamingo's famous speech about good and evil is something absolutely key, as he mentions that basically the people who win, the people who have power, the people who win the war are the ones who decide what is right and what is wrong. But one thing is what is decided, and another thing is what the reality is. Who is good? Who is bad? Being on one side makes you bad, being on the other side makes you good. Well, Oda has been playing with this for more than 1,000 chapters, so according to this theory, it could be that the ancient kingdom were the bad ones, the world government won, and now we are living a lie thinking that the world government are the bad ones. I know at first it might sound completely crazy, and I'm not saying I'm in favor of this theory, but it is true that I see certain arguments that could be very interesting if Oda decides to apply them and decide to expand them to provoke a plot twist. And let's be honest, if one morning you wake up, start reading the One Piece manga chapter, and it reveals that the ancient kingdom were the bad guys and that the world government won and they were the good guys, then it would completely blow your mind. You would be totally surprised, and it would be one of the biggest plot twists in One Piece. And you couldn't say anything to Oda because he has never clearly stated who is the good guy or who is the bad guy, as he has always played a lot with ambiguity, giving rise to this type of theory as well. So as a first theory, I think it's something that's certainly far-fetched, absolutely, but it's also something that could happen. And here, what I want is for you to leave in the comments right now whether you agree with this theory or not. If it had crossed your mind, if you have anything to argue for or against the theory, leave it in the comments. And now, let's move on to the second one. And with the second, we go to something that I think everyone at some point has theorized about things close to this. And it is something that Oda has shown us very clearly. It's something I vividly remember my reaction to when I read it. I remember being in the gym with a friend and reading the One Piece chapter between sets. And when I read it, I was just frozen for a minute or two. And my friend asked me what was going on. Then I had to explain the scene to him, and he, who hadn't watched One Piece, looked at me like, "You're crazy." Today, I have managed to get him up to date with the One Piece manga, and when he saw that, he felt the same as I did and said to me, "Now I understand you," and what I'm talking about is the Reverie arc. I'm specifically talking about the scene where we see Imu, who comes down with Luffy's bounty to a room, and we see that he opens a door and encounters a cold chamber, a frozen chamber, and we see that there's some sort of shelf, and on top there's a giant straw hat, just like Luffy's, frozen. And as a result of this, obviously many theories have emerged. But the one I'm going to present now is a theory that using this argument can suggest that, well, something very crazy could come out of it. The theory basically says that this is nothing more than a foreshadowing from Oda, making it clear that Joy Boy did not die and is frozen there. Yes, just as you hear it, Joy Boy did not die and is frozen there. I know that many people might say that this doesn't make sense, that there are several arguments that couldn't come out, and we would need to see how he is. And the first thing is that it is supposed that Luffy could not have the Nika fruit, since we assume that Joy Boy had that fruit. But the theory suggests that we do not have 100% knowledge of the devil fruits, and that we don't know exactly to what extent they can be used one way or another. That is to say, if a person is frozen to the point where they are really dead, the fruit could emerge, and then when thawed, that person, it wouldn't be dead, but rather, as I say, it would be cryogenically preserved. But the fruit would have already left their body, and it would be a way to extract it. Another thing that is also mentioned is that Joy Boy's will could not have been inherited by other people. And here it goes back to the same. According to the theory, since Joy Boy at that moment would technically be dead, but then would not die due to the same issue of being able to defrost him, then here they go into different variations saying other things about Joy Boy, since there are people saying that maybe the government will use him as a weapon, some saying he'll be used as a slave, some saying he won't have relevance. There are many variations here. I have to say that for me, the idea that Joy Boy is frozen, I don't completely dislike it, but I don't think he's alive. I believe that Joy Boy did indeed die during the Void Century, and I think at most we could see his hat, his head, something of his body as it is frozen, and that they have something there, maybe his own bones, but some memory of that first Joy Boy might make sense that Imu has it frozen there in the chamber. But to my surprise, when I started looking for theories about the Void Century in One Piece, this is one of the most powerful ones I saw, and it surprised me, as there were many people think that Joy Boy did not die, that he is there frozen. But well, it's normal because this cold storage room, along with that giant hat, has brought 1,000 mysteries and 1,000 theories. And I want you to leave in the comments not only whether you think Joy Boy is alive or dead, but also your opinion and your comment on what you think about the giant hat, the freezing, and the whole chamber. What do you think about this? Leave it in the comments, and let's move on to the third theory. Let's move on to the third theory, focusing on one of the most important characters in One Piece to date, and also one of the least understood. We're going to talk about the character Imu. I think it's essential that if we discuss the Void Century, we have to mention Imu along the way. It makes perfect sense. And about Imu, as I say, there are many theories, many. And of course, not knowing anything, we could theorize about everything, as is the case with this character, but here they are going to go a bit further. They are going to try to specify it, and this theory aims to explain the entire meaning of Imu, their entire presence, their entire position in the world government, all the explanation they have, all their past and their connection, not only, as I said, with the Void Century, but with the Ancient Kingdom and the entire mystery of the world of One Piece, as the theory says that Emu is someone from the D clan. People whose secret we do not know today. We do not know what makes them special, but we see they have a D in their name. And today, we still have no idea of its meaning. But this theory goes a bit further. It not only mentions that Imu could be a D, which I have indeed seen several people comment on, but they say that Imu is a D who betrayed the Ancient Kingdom. The theory is basically that Imu was an inhabitant of the Ancient Kingdom, a person from the D clan. Like it could be Kurohige, like Jaguar D. Saul, or like the captain of the Straw Hats, Monkey D. Luffy. But that Imu at some point decided to betray the Ancient Kingdom. Why? For power, to take control of the world government, to create the world government, and to take control of the world, something that finally, over these 800 years, we have seen has gone well for him, and he has achieved it. So this theory suggests that Imu could be the precursor of it all, and could be the key to the start of the revolution, the start of the fall of the Ancient Kingdom, and the beginning of the rise of the world government. Does this make any sense? Well, if we analyze it coldly, I think it does. Oda has taken great care in everything he does with Imu. Carefully shows all his moves, tries not to show more than necessary, tries to teach just enough, and when he has to show something more, it's clear that he has measured it well and believes it's the right moment. Notice that to this day, we still don't know Imu's name, and to this day, we still don't know what happens to him. It is true that we have heard rumors within the work itself, but they are still just rumors. We don't know their face, we don't know their gender, and we have no idea what happens with this character. So when we see a character that is so well crafted, and knowing that we are nearing the end of One Piece, and that one of the great mysteries we have is not only the entire Void Century, but the Ancient Kingdom. What happens with the D? What happens with Imu? Seeing that this theory could connect several pieces at once and explain to us what the meaning of D is. From Imu, what happened with the Ancient Kingdom from Imu? And who is Imu? Obviously from Imu. Well, it would be a great way to do it. It would be like you were playing bowling and got a strike on the first throw. It would be a very good way to do it. So knowing how Oda is, the care he takes with all the mysteries of the work, how he likes to play with us, play with our minds, include foreshadowing, and the attention he has given to everything about Imu, the Ancient Kingdom, and the Void Century, I think this theory makes quite a bit of sense. Now, whether I believe it or not, well, I have my own thoughts about Imu, I have my own thoughts about the world government and the Ancient Kingdom, but as a theory, it makes sense. And if at some point Imu says he is like one of the original D, who knows what the meaning is, the name, because he or she may have even put it, the meaning of the D. And also explain why he betrayed the Ancient Kingdom, what the Ancient Kingdom was, or even if we go crazy and hopefully it happens, Oda, please listen to me, having a flashback of a couple of chapters of Imu through the Ancient Kingdom, seeing firsthand how he betrayed the Ancient Kingdom and how he was creating the world government. Why he did that and explaining everything, that could be crazy. It could break the internet and blow all our minds. So it's something that, whether I believe the theory or not, truly, I would love it, and I would really put money out of my pocket to make this happen. But what do you think? Do you agree with the theory? Do you think Imu could be a traitor of the Ancient Kingdom? Do you think Imu could be a D? Who directly betrayed and created everything? And above all, would you like it? Because one thing is what you believe, and another is what you would like. Leave me a comment, and now let's move on to the fourth theory. The fourth theory is something very interesting and something that once again focuses on the Ancient Kingdom. When we talk about the Void Century, there are several topics to address, and one of them is the Ancient Kingdom. But we are going to get to the root of something. We are going to discuss something that is one of the things that make it particularly special to all of One Piece. And just like in Naruto we have the jutsus, or in Dragon Ball we have the Kamehameha and the Dragon Balls, it's true that in One Piece we have something that makes it very different from the rest. And it's a very characteristic thing, especially concerning powers, and it's obviously the devil fruits, the well-known Akuma no Mi. These fruits, like anything in One Piece that comes a bit from the past, are surrounded by an aura of mystery that Oda seems determined. Well, throw us 3 or 4 things, but it's still not the time to resolve it, and it seems that it's going to wait until chapter 1500 to explain it, and at this pace, I see it possible. The thing is that this theory talks about the explanation of the devil fruits being that they were created by the Ancient Kingdom. Then this theory develops a bit further, obviously, but this is like the basis, saying that these fruits come from the Ancient Kingdom and originate from the Void Century. I think if we talk about the fruits and consider that they come from the Void Century, I think it's quite logical that yes, but in my opinion, they could even come from a bit further back based on what's shown in the murals of Elba. But as I said, this theory talks about the devil fruits being created in the Void Century and were created by this Ancient Kingdom. As I said at the beginning of the video, one of the few things we are somewhat clear about regarding the Ancient Kingdom is that it was something that was very advanced compared to the rest, but very, very, very advanced to the point that, as I said, not even Vegapunk was able to match it and was many years away from its intellect, with Vegapunk being a person who is too intelligent. But even Vegapunk, when asked about the fruits, he was not able to provide a convincing explanation. He merely limited himself to saying certain theories he had, which weren't too scientific either, but he did make it clear that he had been able to copy certain fruits when creating the Seraphim, which would indicate to us, according to this theory, that the fruits are artificial. And if Vegapunk was able to replicate them, being able to do a kind of reverse engineering with things that are already created to create them from scratch would require much more technology, which would explain that they were created in the Ancient Kingdom, in a kingdom with many more laboratories, with much more technology, with many more scientists, and with people with much more development capacity creating these fruits. So this theory makes sense to me. I think it's quite logical and fairly obvious that it does. I believe what would be very interesting is to try to find out why, because it seems that these fruits were created in the Ancient Kingdom. We all agree it could be like that, more or less, but we also have to think about why that kingdom would create the fruits. And if they created them as weapons, why did they lose? How did they lose with these things? Did they create them in response to an attack from the world government, or is there something else behind it? I think the topic of the fruits, being one of the central pillars of One Piece, could have another layer of depth, not just who created them, but why, and that the reason why is very, very key. In my opinion, I think it would be totally crazy. I think it would be very, very top-notch, and I would really love for it to be explained. But it's true that seeing how the work progresses, it seems Oda is going to save it for a little further in the future. Hopefully not too much, but seeing how the chapters of One Piece are advancing, it seems there's still quite a bit left to talk about this. So, well, I have to say that I like the theory. I do buy that the fruits were created during the Void Century, and it's true that I have some ideas, but I don't want to share them in this video because we're going to talk about theories of the Void Century. In contrast, if you have any ideas about the fruits or something to say about the theory, leave it in the comments because you know I will read it. And now let's move on to the fifth theory. And now, pay attention, because we're going to the madhouse. We're getting a straitjacket, going into a padded room, and staying there for a long time, because we're going to discuss a theory that is too crazy, and if it happens, I don't know what reaction the audience would have. In general, and especially the more devoted One Piece fans, so to speak. And it's that the theory talks of obviously the protagonist of the Void Century, who was Joy Boy, with the permission of Imu, I suppose, and it also talks about our protagonist. And we have seen that obviously Luffy is a parallel to Joy Boy. We have seen that he seems to have the same inherited will when we have seen Joy Boy, even if only in silhouettes. We have seen that he is very similar to Luffy, too similar to Luffy. We see that it seems he wore the same hat. It also seems he had the same fruit. Let's say many similarities. And this is justified with the inherited will, which we have seen throughout the whole work, which Oda has taken care to explain, and Oda loves to do this. You can see he loves the theme of inherited will, and which we have seen with other characters, since when we saw Odin's flashback, we saw Roger's, and we felt that it was very similar to Luffy, with several parallels, even in some scenes or behaviors. So I think this makes a lot of sense, seeing the inherited will from one person to another. And as I say, seeing the inherited will of Luffy that we saw in Roger, it makes a lot of sense that this will comes from way back, and that just like Roger and Luffy, Joy Boy was also involved. But the theory tries to explain it in a way, well, more crazy, less realistic, and, well, much less based on things from the manga, but which also, to my surprise, makes a lot of sense. And, well, I don't know if everyone will like it. The thing is that the theory says there is so much parallelism between Joy Boy and Luffy. There are so many similarities, there are so many coincidences because they are the same person. This is crazy, I know. You're gonna say, well, what are you doing? Stop drinking, stop the alcohol. No, let's see. The theory says that Joy Boy and Luffy are indeed the same person, that this Joy Boy we have seen in memories, that we have seen on the mural, that Nika we have seen so many times is simply Luffy. He has the same fruit, he has the same power, such and such. It's the same, it's exactly the same. This would even explain why Emmett got confused upon seeing him, saying, hey, you are Joy Boy. And Luffy was like, what do you mean Joy Boy? What are you telling me? Who are you? But obviously you might say, but this can't be because Joy Boy lived at least 800 years ago, and Luffy, well, is obviously living now. Alright, so the theory talks about time travel. I know someone will say, well, this doesn't make sense. Let's pause for a moment. We've seen the character Toki, who was able to send people to the future and even jump to the future herself. So, if we have seen people jump to the future, why couldn't there be people who jump to the past? The idea is that at some point, both Luffy and all the Straw Hats, they will travel to the past and we will have an arc, which will be the Void Century, but it won't be a flashback. Instead, we will experience it, we will see the Void Century firsthand, and this would explain the entire work of One Piece. Oda wouldn't bother to create a flashback of the Void Century to explain it in a very brief, very undetailed way. And seeing it from someone's point of view, but would send the Straw Hats to the Void Century, we would be there and see everything firsthand, because we wouldn't just see how it happens, but we would make it happen, which would be really crazy. This, as I say, may sound very crazy, but the idea is that One Piece would be a loop. That is, Luffy would be born inheriting Roger's will, who in turn would inherit it from various people, who would be the same Luffy. At some point, Luffy would go so far that he would travel to the past, go back, become Joy Boy, and would be the very person who would make the will be inherited. And outward facing the future, and in this way, it would be a loop. The only thing I don't like about this theory, apart from the fact that obviously it's a very big madness, and I don't know if this could turn out well, is that it is specified to us that the world government won that war and the others lost. So if this were a loop, we couldn't win because Luffy would travel to the past, and then everything would be a loop for Luffy. Fought, lost that fight, and returned to the present and lost again, and so on. And it would all be a loop all the time, which would make no sense because the good guys wouldn't win. And being One Piece, it doesn't quite fit because if you haven't noticed, Oda usually makes sure that the good guys win and everything ends well. Why? Because he wants to have a banquet, you know, the famous banquet at the end of each arc. And personally, it's one of the things I like the most. I mean, Oda, very well, I mean, keep going that way. But the theory that the world is a loop, that Luffy can travel to the past and so on, to my surprise, has too many positives and too many good points. And if you analyze it from a neutral standpoint, there's the topic of time travel, which is explained with the topic of Toki. And there are all the extreme similarities between Joy Boy and Luffy, because you see Roger and you see Luffy, and you see they look alike, but you can tell them apart. But of Joy Boy, what we've seen is that he is literally Luffy. So there are many concerns with this, and I don't know what could happen. I don't think it will happen because I believe it would be getting into a very tricky situation, and especially because when you introduce time travel to the past, paradoxes and very bad things can be created. It's very difficult to execute a time travel work that involves traveling to the past and changing the present. It's quite complicated. That's why I think Oda did well by introducing travels to the future. Because this way you don't alter the past. I mean, I don't know how it would happen, but well, the theory seems super interesting to me. That's why I wanted to bring it up. I wanted to develop it a bit more. And above all, I want you to leave a little comment about what you think of this theory, if you like it or not, and if you would include it in the work. Now, let's move on to the sixth theory. This sixth theory is something very interesting that could happen, and perhaps isn't so far-fetched within what One Piece is. I mean, it's still a slightly crazy theory, and it brings us back to the character of Joy Boy. Don't worry, there are no time travels now. The idea is that, as I say, we don't know much about this character. I repeat that we only know he lived in the Void Century, that he seemingly had the Nika fruit, that he resembled Luffy, and that's it. And this is related to various mysteries that might exist in the world of One Piece. And if we look closely as we have progressed through the entire map of One Piece, there are some very crazy things, islands that do not make sense, things that are like magic. And One Piece has a world, and islands that seem taken out of that, a fairy tale, they seem like islands that are fake. And among so many things, Oda may have included something that is not simply natural to the world of One Piece, but it has a consequence. Something that is placed there very subtly to surprise you, obviously, but since it's the world of One Piece, you say, ah, what a cool place. That's it. And the theory talks about there being a very strong connection, important, between the character Joy Boy and Enies Lobby Island. What's going on with Enies Lobby? Some might ask, why? What connection is there? Enies Lobby is a very strange island. It's a very, very curious place. As we see, there is an island marked with the stone path suspended in the air. There is a very large hole below, and it's a place where it's always sunny. It's a place very, very strange. Perhaps it goes a bit unnoticed because in that arc, we see Robin recount the Ohara flashback, saying the now famous line, "I want to live." We have great battles of the Straw Hats against the CP9, with fights that are utterly legendary, and for me, the best in One Piece, that is Luffy versus Lucci. We also have the Mary going to help the Straw Hats escape. In other words, it's an arc that has many things, and maybe Oda didn't do this just because, but on purpose to distract us a bit. He throws these things in here. Why? Because the entire island of Enies Lobby is very, very key. And let's analyze again everything I've said. It's an island with a very strange structure, with a hole underneath. A giant that no one notices and is there, and above all, it's sunny all day. At first we can't find much explanation for the sun, but maybe for the hole, yes. And it's because after they used the Mother Flame in Lulusia, we can infer, we can assume that this weapon was also used in Enies Lobby. If it was used in Enies Lobby, we justify the hole, but it doesn't explain why the island is half built. That is to say, that weapon should have destroyed Enies Lobby Island. And also, why is it always sunny there? None of this is explained. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Well, this crazy theory connects Enies Lobby with Joy Boy, with an action, with a moment, and with a thing, making everything make sense within the logic of this theory. And the theory says that Joy Boy in the Void Century fought at Enies Lobby against the world government, just like Luffy did. But at some point, the world government decided to use the Mother Flame in its version, probably at 100%, not a part as it is supposed to have been used. in Lulusha and decided to use it against the entire island of Eni's lobby. But at that moment, Joy Boy, seeing that all his Nakama, all his friends, all the people there were going to die, he stretched his body with the Nika fruit, wrapped it around the island of Eni's lobby, and protected it. And that's why we see there is a huge hole, because it did not cover the entire surface, but only that part of the island. That's why the island would still be standing, because it's the part that Joy Boy could wrap, and that he withstood the impact, but Joy Boy died at that moment. He withstood the impact, but after returning to his normal state, after stretching, he died. And this would justify why there is always sun, because having the fruit of the sun god, which we know is now the fruit that has Luffy and that Joy Boy had, well, this caused his will in some way to always remain and made it so that there was always sun. Why? Because as I say, that's where the sun god died. I know it might sound a bit out there, but let's see. We are on an island that, as I said, doesn't have a logical explanation. There are too many crazy things. Some might think this doesn't make sense, but I challenge you to give me a more logical explanation than this. Personally, I think it's a theory I can believe. I'm not saying it will definitely be this way, but I think I've never found myself an explanation for all the strange phenomena that occur on this island that I believe that find meaning and say, okay, that seems fine to me. And this makes a lot of sense, especially as I say, the death of Joy Boy causing there to always be sun. I think that's what convinces me the most, because I can't think of any way to make it always sunny. Mainly because obviously when it's night, the sun shouldn't be shining at that point in the world. But of course, if perhaps Joy Boy died there, it makes it so there's always sun, because his will somehow created a kind of sun. Artificial. And also about the hole, about the island, and the wrapping around it is something that makes a lot of sense. Explaining about the fruit, explaining the hole, and above all, blowing our minds as Oda usually does with these things. Even though it is a very crazy theory, it is quite little known. When I saw it, I was surprised because I had never heard it before, and honestly, I liked it. But I want you to leave in the comments right now if you agree with the theory, if you like it or not. And now, let's move on to the 7th theory, and there is a character from the Void Century, of whom we haven't said anything, and we have covered 6 theories. There are very few characters we know who lived in the Void Century and of whom we have some minimum knowledge. As I said, Emu, Joy Boy, and the Ancient Kingdom as a general concept, but we forget a character who seems a bit overlooked, but we do know that this person is much older than the Void Century. Going to the murals of Elba, it could directly go to the first world we were taught in the texts, but this is a little further, and it's the character of Zunesha. Yes, that giant elephant that destroyed Jack's ships just by swinging its trunk. And this character is mentioned to be over a C-1,000 years old, which is insanely powerful, very beastly, serving a punishment for something he did but we don't know what, carrying the entire mink tribe on his back. And as an interesting fact, we saw that Joy Boy and Emu were on top of him when we saw him in the flashback, as they are on one of the pillars we see there. But as I mentioned, we haven't said absolutely anything about this character despite him having gone through the Void Century. So we need to discuss something about him, and I'm not going to tell you exactly what punishment he committed or why he is walking, but I will talk about the explanation. And let's pause for a moment. Zunesha is something completely different from anything we have seen in One Piece. I mean, it's too big. I mean, it's massively big. The only thing we saw similar is what we saw in Thriller Bark, where we saw some shadows that to this day have no explanation. So I don't know how to justify whether it is bigger or smaller than Zunesha. I don't know, but I think it's the only thing we can see that resembles it. But that elephant is truly excessively large. So what about this? What is the theory? The theory tries to justify what Zunesha is as a concept in general, and the theory says that Zunesha is an ancient weapon that ate a devil fruit. Some will say this doesn't make sense because in theory there are only 3 ancient weapons. We know them well, and we have already seen them all and know where they are. We know that Poseidon is Shirahoshi, we know that Pluton is hidden in Wano, and we assume that Uranus is the weapon used by the world government or something along the style. So it doesn't make any sense for Zunesha to be an ancient weapon. But of course, we have to lay our cards on the table, and we must consider that obviously these weapons could be replicable. So who's to say that the original Pluton, for example, is not Zunesha? Just as an example, it could be any of the other 2, and that they are weapons that could be replicable, and that Zunesha could be the first one, or it could be as simple as it being a 4th ancient weapon that we do not know, and that this character was given a devil fruit and became Zunesha. The theory, at first, as I say, might sound very crazy, but there is an interesting argument that could lead us to this, and that is Spandam's sword, Fangfrey, and this sword had a fruit. Do you remember which one it was? In indeed the elephant one. And this, it could be one of the many foreshadows Oda includes to justify things later. And in a place like Eni's lobby, with characters so linked to the world government and a character like Spandam, it wouldn't make much sense for them to give us a hint, a clue about something we'll see later. And in this case, make the formula of the sword eating an elephant fruit repeat itself again. Perhaps it is something similar, that maybe that ancient weapon also ate an elephant fruit a long time ago. So much time. I know someone will say that there are no two devil fruits alike, but as I say, Zunesha comes from more than 1,000 years ago. So, who tells you that at that moment they couldn't create two fruits? And since Zunesha had eaten one, they decided to replicate it, and that's how the other one Spandam has was created. As I said, this is what the theory says, and it makes a lot of sense. So the theory explains that at some point Oda would reveal Zunesha's true identity, and that it would be, as I said, an ancient weapon that ate us devil fruit. Personally, I must say that the theory doesn't fully convince me, but the arguments are there, and I believe they are presented in a way that if Oda deciding to explain it and include it in the work makes sense, and I think that's the most important thing when creating a theory. So even though I don't like it, the facts are there and it's possible. So let me know in the comments what you think about this, and let's move on to the eighth theory. And now yes, we're gonna talk about a place, but we're not gonna talk about the ancient kingdom, or maybe we will, and we're gonna talk about an island that perhaps could have a slightly more curious secret than we think. As of today, we practically know all the islands that are the world of One Piece, or in the most important ones we've already been, but the only ones we have left to see within the manga, they are Lodestar and Laugh Tale, with the exception of God Valley, which we don't know what happened to it. And this theory talks about the island of Laugh Tale with something curious. We still have several chapters to visit Laugh Tale. We know little about Laugh Tale. We only know that it is where the One Piece is, in case, but if that were not enough, and that Roger visited it and no one else can find it. So we know that this island has something different from the rest, as I say, not only because of the importance of having the One Piece, which is a treasure left by Joy Boy, but also because it seems that this island is hidden from the eyes of the world. And it is very complicated that with all the people in the world of One Piece navigating the sea, no one has found it by chance. Only Roger found it, and to find it, we have to get the 4 red pony glyphs, read them, and then trace a map to reach the island, which is perfect. But the idea that this theory has is that this makes Laugh Tale a much more special island than we initially thought, because let's see, why would this island hide in such a way? Why would so many things have to be done to find an island? Why do we have to read 4 red poneglyphs and do 1,000 things to reach the island? And if that's the case, how was it found the first time? Because I mean, once you have the 4 red poneglyphs, okay, it's perfect that you can reach the island, but how did they arrive at Laugh Tale the first time if no one had written them? I mean, the first time someone arrived, did they have to take all those steps or do all those things mentioned there? And as I said, it doesn't seem like someone found it by chance. So the theory, this idea, suggests that maybe this island is artificially created. By whom? By the kingdom. Ancient. I repeat that the ancient kingdom had technology and things that we cannot imagine today. We have seen many crazy things in the world of One Piece. Even Vegapunk has called them crazier than anything the world government did, things that were very advanced for their time. So from this, we have to consider that it is possible they created an island, and especially that might be that they hid it. And this makes a lot of sense. Let's think, if the ancient kingdom was involved in the poneglyphs, in their creation, in all the writing, and in distributing them through, the world, as we assume with the red poneglyphs, should be the same. And if they also created the red poneglyphs and gave the instructions to find Laugh Tale, it's probably because they hid the island. So what if this is an artificial island created by the kingdom? Ancient, hidden by the ancient kingdom, made in such a way that no one can find it. Joy Boy, who would surely be the mastermind or the most important person of that kingdom, left the most important thing there, and they left it on an island as a secret so that no one could find it, hiding them. Manually, making sure that effectively nobody could find it by chance because they trusted themselves to hide it, and this would drive people crazy looking for the island with no way to find it. Why? Because it is not an island. Natural. It's not something you're gonna find by chance. It's something that's purposely hidden to be able to find it only those who deserve it, and this theory makes too much sense. It explains all the problems with Laugh Tale, explains all the mystery that may surround the ancient kingdom, and explains why nothing of Laugh Tale has been shown to us. Why? Because perhaps if we see the island of Laugh Tale and how it is, and if we see certain things from that island, we can find out that it is an island that is artificially created when this is something that is not very much in the mind of the
People, since as the island is talked about as just another island, well, it seems to be a natural island that cannot be reached by circumstances of life. But as I say, it makes no sense that they found it in the first place and then deal with the poneglyphs. It would have to be that they have hidden the island. It's something that makes perfect sense. And this theory, as I say, I like so much and I buy into it so much because it's my theory. It's a theory I've decided to include in the video because I am very convinced of this. I believe the Ancient Kingdom created this island. I think they hid it themselves. And I think that perhaps the moment Oda is waiting for to reveal things about the Ancient Kingdom is reaching Laugh Tale, discovering the history of the island, discovering Joy Boy's treasure, and there we would find out, perhaps not 100%, but the most important part of the history of the Ancient Kingdom, which, for me, in my opinion, would be an absolute cinema, and I would love it. Oda, do that. But above all, I want you to leave me comments about what you think of the theory, if you agree, if not, and if you would change something, perhaps. Now, let's move on with the ninth theory. The ninth theory is the most important theory of the entire video because it would cause changes in the world of One Piece that would be crazy and would have already triggered them. And this theory justifies many things that have been told to us in the work, which we are not able to justify, and that could solve mysteries from the entire Void Century and from over 800 years ago. And this theory comes from a premise. The world of One Piece, as we know it, has not always been oriented in the same way. That is, the current distribution of islands, oceans, currents, climates, and even the red line or the calm belt could be the result of a brutal cataclysm that changed the orientation of the planet's poles. We're not talking about a simple earthquake, but a geological event, or an energy event on a planetary scale that rotated the globe on its axis, altering the north and south. And what does this have to do with the Void Century, Joy Boy, or Ibu? Quite a lot. This theory suggests that the Void Century was not a war, it was a cataclysm. During those 100 years erased from official history, there wasn't just a war between the Ancient Kingdom and the 20 allied kingdoms, the predecessors to the world government, but what also happened in parallel was a geological event. Brutal. There was a pole shift, either literally magnetic or physical, in the rotation of the planetary axis, which totally reconfigured the world. The sea level rose, islands disappeared, the climate changed, and most importantly, the Ancient Kingdom was erased from the map, not just by the war, but because its location was submerged, displaced, or completely inaccessible. In other words, at some point, the world of One Piece was turned and all the poles were moved, causing a huge disaster. Now, why would this theory make any sense that it happened in One Piece? Let's look at some strange, a bit curious things in the world of One Piece that would be easily explained if this event had occurred. First, the red line. It's a mountain range. It stretches for thousands of kilometers, encircling the entire world in the form of a ring. And if this did not exist before the Void Century and was created as a result of the cataclysm, since it is supposed that if this occurred in the real world, all the landmass would gather around the Earth, just like the case of the red line. Then we have the calm belts, two strips of sea without wind, impossible to traverse, that also cross the entire world. And what if they are areas directly affected by the change in the planet's orientation? Another thing that would be justified. Then, the Grand Line. Its absurd climate, its currents, its storms, all of it could be a direct consequence of the planetary readjustment and the pole shift. And something even curious, the Sky Islands and their ruins. And it's that many civilizations, destroyed in ancient times, they seem to be in the sky. And beyond the knockup streams, what if they were thrown into the sky by a brutal geological force, like being launched due to the movement of the Earth's crust, or a colossal eruption related to the pole shift? That is, as a result of it stopping, well, everything was thrown and parts of civilizations were launched into the sky and remained on those islands. And then we could even talk about something else, which would be the Mother Flame. And it is that, of course, with the Mother Flame coming into play, pay attention, because this energy source, which is supposedly infinite, that we saw Vegapunk recreated, if we assume that this energy existed 900 years ago, it is possible that the Ancient Kingdom used it as a technological and energy core, until perhaps the overload or misuse caused this global cataclysm because of it. Mother Flame, from that sun we saw in the Elba mural, and it's said that the Mother Flame could have been the trigger that destabilized the entire planet. This connects with a possible use as an ancient weapon, an energy source so immense that if it gets out of control, it can cause tectonic plates to collapse, generate global earthquakes and tsunamis, and even change the Earth's rotation. The theory says that the activation or explosion of the Mother Flame caused the pole shift, and this altered forever the world, marking the beginning of the new order with the world government at the helm. And as we see, this theory seems very crazy because it is. It's a super super crazy theory, but if we think about it, it justifies many things that could have happened in the world of One Piece. The fact that the Mother Flame exploded, the fact that there was a different event but the poles shifted, are things that might initially seem very crazy, but they help justify many things in the world of One Piece. Now, could this happen within the manga? Well, I believe it could. I personally think this has happened and that maybe I could justify it with other things I have in my head, but that I will develop more and develop it further later. But I firmly believe that the idea of a pole shift in One Piece makes sense, that the world of One Piece has rotated or something like that has happened, simply because obviously the red line doesn't appear naturally and the gun belt, well, the same. So seeing all these things that could only be explained with a pole shift, I think it's too straightforward not to be true and not exist. But well, I'm aware that it's a far-fetched idea and something too crazy, so let me know in the comments what you think about this. And now, let's move on to the 10th theory. Which is one of the most curious and also most interesting. Well, so we are going to talk about where the Ancient Kingdom is supposed to have been. The Ancient Kingdom, as of today, we know it is destroyed, that it doesn't exist, or that there is no record, okay? We know that, but where could it have been located before? Oda might have left us some clues. We might have seen where it could be located, or it was simply in the middle of the sea and was devastated. Well, the theory suggests that it is in a place we have already passed, that we have already seen, and that we saw some time ago. A long time. And the theory makes more sense than it seems. And the theory indicates that Shandora was not just a lost city of gold, but rather the very ancient kingdom, the home of Joy Boy, the core of the whole story. Everything starts with Enel's cover story on the moon. It is said that in the past there were 3 human races that were living on the moon: the Shandians, the Skypians, and the Birkins. These races were technologically very advanced and were the ones who created those little robots we saw there, the ones that appear in Enel's mini story. And they were living peacefully until they ran out of resources and had to come down to the earth. And so the Skypians and the Birkins settled on the islands of the sky, like Skypiea. But the Shandians descended to the earth, descended to the sea, to the blue. But the Shandians went further down, landing on an island shaped like a skull, had a very peculiar shape, which was the island of Jaya. Once on Jaya, the Shandians built a majestic city called Shandora, which interestingly enough, Shandora comes from Sanskrit, which would be Chandra, which means moon. That is, a city with a lunar name founded by a race that came from the moon. This already sounds very strange, but come on, it's not a coincidence. Moreover, they also worship the sun god, which fits even more with the figure of Joy Boy, the solar symbolism and everything there is from One Piece. And here comes the big part. That golden city, which many in Jaya believed was a legend, was real. Nolan saw it, Calgara lived in it, and when it was destroyed, half of the island was launched into the sky by a current, creating what we would later know as the Upper Yard. But why was this city the Ancient Kingdom? The key to the theory is that Shandora was not just a city, but a complete kingdom. A very powerful kingdom, very advanced with its own culture, writing, and technology. And now get ready, because I am going to give you the justifications given to substantiate that Shandora was the very same Ancient Kingdom. The first is that they used poneglyphs, and Robin, when she finds the poneglyphs in Shandora, literally says that this city was protecting the history of the world, just like what the Ancient Kingdom did. The poneglyphs were everywhere in Shandora. There weren't just 1 or 2 like on other islands. It seemed to be part of their everyday language. That is to say, the poneglyph language was the language there. And not only that, the poneglyph language is engraved on the buildings, and that is not seen anywhere else. This confirms that they not only used that language for the poneglyphs, but it was their normal language. So yes, the poneglyphs belonged to the Ancient Kingdom, and this language was theirs. Another thing is that it was a prosperous civilization before the Void Century. It is mentioned that the city prospered more than 900 years ago, just before the century Void, and it was destroyed 800 years ago, exactly when it ended, at the same time as the Ancient Kingdom. In other words, the dates match, meaning if Andorra disappears at the same time as the Ancient Kingdom. Coincidence? I don't think so. Then we have that Jaya was shaped like a skull, and here's a detail that I find a gem, and that is, it's said that the island of Jaya, if you put it together as it was originally before it broke apart, it was shaped like a skull. And what does that have to do with anything? Well, what is the symbol of piracy? The skull, the Jolly Roger. And who was the first pirate in the world according to Vegapunk? Joy Boy. Another connection. So if Joy Boy was from the Ancient Kingdom, and the Ancient Kingdom was on an island shaped like a skull, and that island was Jaya, and in Jaya was Shandora, Joy Boy was from Shandora. Therefore, Shandora, it's the Ancient Kingdom. This would also explain why Mock Town, the current town of Jaya, is so pirate-like. Bars, fights, drunks, crazy stories. Because it's built on the ruins of the place where piracy began. They were literally in the cradle of piracy. laughing at him without knowing they are right above. Then we have the worship of the sun god, as Kalgara, the legendary warrior of Shandora, looked very similar to what is later revealed as Nika. We see that he had wild hair, was muscular, smiling, with a spear. It would fit well that the Shandians were the first worshippers of Nika and that Joy Boy was the chosen one of that deity. This would explain why that ancient and forgotten religion of Nika comes precisely from that city, hence the fear of the world government. The ideology of freedom that Nika represented was born in the ancient kingdom, and that is what they wanted to erase. And why did we know nothing about this? Because the world government did everything to erase Shandora from history. It eliminated its records. It probably had something to do with Jaya being blown up into the sky by that current that split the island in half. It hid the poneglyphs that were protected by the descendants of Shandora, and on top of that, controlled the entire history to make it seem like all that were legends, as with Mont Blanc Nolan and the history of Shandora. In conclusion, this theory that Shandora was the ancient kingdom is very good, but very, very good, and it makes sense. It has a basis in the manga. Above all, it makes sense of a lot of things that until now were scattered. The theme of the cult of Nika, the obsession with protecting the poneglyph, the skull shape of Jaya, the importance of Skypia, the symbol of piracy. And I find it great, and I love that it all seems to have evidence. And the best part is how everything fits, from the theme of the moon, with what I've mentioned about Chandra, which means moon, Shandora, and all that, to Mocktown having such a pirate atmosphere. And they laugh at piracy itself, and they laugh at certain things when they are in the cradle of everything, obviously going through Joy Boy, Nika, the poneglyphs. That is to say, there are too many coincidences. So seeing all this, it becomes quite clear that this is no coincidence, that there are too many things in place, that this seems to be the case, that Shandora is the ancient kingdom, or that it was the capital of the ancient kingdom, like little. And I am very sure that the vast majority of people who have heard this theory, after this you will be very convinced that this is so, and that there is more connection than we thought, that you are convinced that the ancient kingdom is Shandora. And even those who are not in favor of this, who are somewhat against, who are a little skeptical, you can leave it in the comments, because you know I love reading them, and I want you to tell me in the comments what you think about this theory, if you agree, if you don't, and why. Above all, justify it with arguments, because you know that I love reading your comments. The first one is that Kid is a Vegapunk, that Eustace Kid is a creation of Vegapunk, and that he is part of his own being. Yes, okay, let's see. I'm saying this is very absurd. You're gonna say, how can this be real? Well, the truth is that you're gonna be a bit shocked if you don't know the theory. The thing is that, of course, we know the character of Vegapunk. The first thing they tell us when they introduce him is the fact that he has divided his mind into several parts. And it's that although as of today, the Vegapunk Stella, who was the original, is dead, we still have the rest of the Vegapunks. And it is that we had a total of 6 Vegapunks. We had Vegapunk Shaka, Vegapunk York, Vegapunk Atlas, Vegapunk Pythagoras, Vegapunk Lilith, and Vegapunk Arizo. That is, as I say, a total of 6. Well, the theory indicates it is possible that Eustace Kid himself is a creation of Vegapunk, and that this... well, really, it might be like that in some way. The first thing I want to say is that you are probably thinking that this theory cannot be real because 2 years ago, Vegapunk had not created the other bodies, meaning he was the only one, and this is something that has happened during these 2 years when they have been inactive, since this says during the manga that it is something, quote, recent, and Kid obviously is more than 2 years old. Well, the theory says that Vegapunk already had this idea in mind for a long time, and that he created Kid, let's say, as the 7th Vegapunk. But being the first one, that is kind of labeling him as number 7, but he would be the first, okay? So this theory kind of makes it seem like, yes, that it is presented in the manga in one way, but they try to give it a spin to make it real. As I said, these are absurd theories, don't take them too seriously. The thing is, obviously, we have to go to the arguments that, according to this theory, suggest Kid could be a Vegapunk. And the first thing is Kid's own connection with the theme of robots. First of all, we have that he has the Jiki fruit. Jiki. Fun fact, Oda never explained in the manga the name of this fruit, nor its function or anything. Instead, he was asked in an SBS and said, oh, I hadn't explained it? Well, it's called Jiki Jiki, and it works like this. It's the fruit of electromagnetism and so on, so on. This is not a joke. I mean, it sounds like a joke, but well, it's poor Kid. I mean, they put his flashback in an SBS and explain his fruit in an SBS. Poor thing. The thing is, as I said, Kid's relationship with robots is something that has been around for a long time. And when Oda drew the supernovas as children, what he did with Kid was draw him creating a robot, like playing with a robot, manipulating it, trying to create it, right? Let's say like that, trying to play with robots, with metal pieces and all that, as I said, when he was a child. So of course, the connection comes from there. The thing about the fruit, being able to handle metals, Kid's ultimate attack, which is that electromagnetic cannon and such. Well, these are things very much related to the whole robotics theme. So from here, a kind of connection was established. And speaking of Kid's ultimate attack, does anyone remember what it's called? Wow, it's called Damned Punk. Wow, punk. Because yes, I mean, there's no reason for it, but it has a 07, which as I told you, we have 6 Vegapunks, and this would be the 07. So, of course, it's at this moment that you start to go off on a tangent and you say, okay. They start like a lot of things coming out, right? And there's another one that's even worse. And it's that when the Straw Hats arrive at Egghead, we see that the Sea Beast weapons appear, these sea creatures created by Vegapunk, manipulated by Vegapunk and all that. And we see that there are some, well, with an interesting design, but there is one that is literally Kid. I mean, he has like red hair on his back, kind of like glasses on his head. And you see it and it's directly Kid. I mean, it even gives fear. I mean, it even scares you to see the similarity it has with Kid, because in fact, you even see its face. You see the snout with the tongue sticking out like that, and it's literally him. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it even gives you a bit of a bad vibe. You say, but damn, it really seems like they based it on him to make it. So basically, these are the majority of the argument. Maybe Vegapunk has been able to influence something in Kid's abilities to enhance them, being able to create the damn punk and putting the 07 as a reference to it being his creation or something like that. I know this also sounds really far-fetched, but, well, it seems a bit more logical than the idea that Vegapunk created Kid. As I told you, the theory tries to change the time aspect, and the idea that no, that first he created Kid, but then created the rest by separating him from his mind. Well, basically, they try to play with this, but as you see, it seems odd, like there's a lot of coincidence. The matter of the damn punk, precisely the 07 there in the attack, the subject of the robot, the matter of the sea beast that looks a lot like Kid. It's weird, really. It's a strange theory, and honestly, I already brought it to the channel at the time because, hey, I find it cool. Like, hey, there are many coincidences. Is it intentional from Oda, or is it a coincidence? Well, it's likely a coincidence because, after all, when you draw, thousands of characters and thousands of chapters, so it's normal that in certain things, your mind starts following the same paths, and you might draw things unintentionally. Or maybe even 07 has been drawn there for us to think this, because this is just my wild idea. It's my craziness. I think Oda sometimes puts things to mess with us and make us overthink. I really believe it, honestly. I think sometimes he says, I'll put this here, so they overthink it. I really believe it. I mean, it's shameless. Moving on to the second theory, let's go with this one is very typical. Let's go with a super typical theory, but you love it, and whoever hasn't heard it will jump out of their chair, really, if you're sitting down. Except you who's watching the video while you're walking, I see you like, stay still, right? Hey, well, the theory is that Crocodile is Luffy's mother. How this theory sounds? Well, obviously, this is very meme. I mean, this theory is very meme. Haha, Crocodile is Luffy's mother. Haha, heh, alright. I know that this theory, as I say, sounds like a meme, sounds completely like a joke. Everyone like, we know it. Well, I'm gonna explain it to you because I assume that everyone knows it. There might be someone who doesn't know. The thing is that, well, Luffy, no, we don't know his mother, we don't know anything. And first of all, I know you're gonna tell me there will be some smart person in the comments. Zara, but Oda said in an SBS that Luffy's mother is not going to be important. I know Oda said that. Do you believe Oda? I don't trust him. I mean, I don't trust that. Oh, the mother of Luffy isn't going to be important. Don't you think that if Luffy's mother were going to be important, he would say exactly that? Or what do you expect him to say? No, Luffy's mother is going to be super important. Wait to see her in the work. Wow, you're going to be so eager. And we are hyped, and when it happens, well, nothing will happen, because we are already hyped. So if something crazy happens when we least expect it, and it turns out Luffy's mother is someone important, hey, it's cool, right? I mean, I think it's good. I can bring you 1,000 theories about Luffy's mother. Obviously, I know. In fact, maybe I'll make a video about 7 theories on Luffy's mother. We'll see. But the thing is to talk about why Crocodile. The point is that Crocodile is supposed to have a hidden secret, since when we're in Impel Down, we see that Ivankov mentions the subject of being able to change people's gender, and then we see when they're with Crocodile, he says that he doesn't want to reveal his secret or something like that. And Crocodile, well, he seems a bit puzzled and all. So there are certain things that can lead to the thought that Crocodile was once a woman, since Oda once drew all the Shichibukai in their female versions. And precisely the only one who has an appearance that's not, let's say, meme-like, because you see Kuma, for example, and he looks like a meme or things like that, but it looks very natural, is Crocodile's. And actually, she looks very pretty. More than Luffy's mom, she could be the hottie of Luffy. No, really, you're gonna get me in trouble one of these days. The thing is, well, it's supposed that Crocodile was once a woman and was Luffy's mother. Why is this? Well, because we've seen that Crocodile has a mysterious past. We don't know exactly where they come from. We don't know their past and such. Maybe having a connection with Ivankov could mean a connection with Dragon, who is Luffy's father, due to the fact that Dragon and Ivankov are in the revolutionaries and all that. We don't know anything about Luffy's mother. It matches with Luffy's skin color and hair color too. I mean, these are things that, well, they could fit and stuff, but obviously it's very crazy. The thing is, this theory is supposed to stem from here. Now the question is, how likely is this theory? Well, in a canonical way, let's say, there's nothing stopping us from thinking that this could be the case. I mean, there is no reason to think that Crocodile can't be Luffy's mother. We haven't seen a flashback of Crocodile. We don't have exactly any of this. In fact, even when we have seen a drawing of him in his childhood, since I mentioned that he drew the Shichibukai in his childhood and everything, we saw how his gender is not very clear. I mean, it's not clear if he is a boy or a girl, since they tell you he is a girl and you believe it, and they tell you he is a boy and you also believe it. So, well, maybe he was born a girl and then later on wanted to become a boy. In fact, one of the arguments given for this is that, precisely, Whitebeard only had men in what was his main crew. Later on, he did have certain allies who were girls. But maybe the confrontation Crocodile and Shirohige might have had in the past, and the hate he might have had for Shirohige was because he didn't accept him in the crew because he was a woman. So he changed his sex to become a man, but Shirohige rejected him again. And maybe this could, well, have a little bit of plot and could have something. The thing is, personally, the theory of Crocodile being Luffy's mother sounds very funny to me, but you know what happens. Every day as I advance in the life, I'm already thinking that maybe the joke amidst the jokes reveals some truth. So I'm a bit like, well, I wouldn't say yes, but I think and I say, really, if there has to be a mother for Luffy, since every female character that appears, the community starts saying is Luffy's mother. I'm telling you, every time I do a review with a new female character, everyone is like, no, Luffy's mother, not Luffy's mother. And if not the bed, I mean, you're there between one and the other. So of course, Luffy's mother could be someone important. Man, it's possible. In fact, there are theories like it could be Emu and so on. I don't know. Now, if Crocodile is Luffy's mother, I would love it. I mean, seriously, I would really love it. Imagine the situation where suddenly Dragon says, oh yeah, you faced your mother. He says, what do you mean your mother? Oh yes, Crocodile. And Luffy like, oh, well, I don't know. I mean, it would be such a moment. It would be very funny. I don't know. Personally, I think it would be fun. Personally, I think it would be fun and quite interesting. Now, well, like I say, the probability is so random, it's a freaking roulette. Really? It's a roulette. You just spin the roulette and see what comes up. Now, in the comments, I want you to let me know what you think of this second absurd theory. So what do you think? Do you agree? Would you like it? Wouldn't you like it? Well, leave it there for me because it's curious. Let's go with the third one. And here I tell you, it's like one wild idea after another. The third is that Kina is alive. Yes. Quina is alive. I mean, Quina is alive. That's the theory, basically. Well, I know that, as I say, when they say in Japan that someone fell down the stairs, it basically means they took themselves out of the picture. Done. You understand me. So, well, this is a bit strange because I've seen people say this is not really the case, that in Japanese it's not like that. So, well, I leave it a bit open. I've heard people say yes, people say no, but the thing, it's just, well, I'm bringing you a theory that is really wild. It's a big stretch, and the theory is as follows. There is a cover of which I don't remember the exact chapter right now, to be honest, but there's a cover featuring Quina's father next to what is supposed to be Quina's grave. I mean, it's supposed, I want to say, because there are the graves and everything and so on. So you can see there is some kind of grave in the background where you can't exactly read everything written there. That is, all the kanji or how it's pronounced can't be read exactly, but you can roughly read the first 2 or 3. And the thing is that it's supposed to say Ivan de Ivankov. I mean, this is crazy. Really? This is, like I said, very crazy. So it's assumed that on that piece of the tombstone, it says the kanjis of Ivan, and there are many people who might think it comes from Ivankov because, let's be serious, it's weird. It's weird. It's very weird that you put that tombstone in the background, which is the only one that can be read. And it's exactly those 3 kanjis that you can read. As I say, this could be some trolling by Oda, or it could be real, because it's very strange to include the Ivankov thing. Because, I mean, about Ivankov, because there are many people who say, no, that Ivankov turned back to be Kina, man. I also say this because of one thing, and it turns out we've already seen the revolutionary ship where Zoro's village was, the Shimotsuki village. Was it Shimotsuki village the name? I think so. Well, now I can't remember. The name of the village doesn't matter. They were there in the village. This was seen in the manga. I mean, I will be showing you the image on the screen for you to see from the anime, not the manga, because the manga has a lot of copies. So, well, I put it here, and then it's strange. I mean, I want to say the theory already starts with the idea that the revolutionaries and the village of Zoro have already had a connection. We have the fact that Quina hated being a woman because she said she couldn't be the best swordsman of all due to her physical condition and such. So it makes sense that she wanted to change bodies, so to speak, change genders, rather. Then there's also Kina's death, which is very strange. Like, I don't know. Yes, in the manga, you see the body, but it's, as I said, very strange, very odd altogether. It's like very sudden. Honestly, it's a bit strange. Maybe, well, it could be that Kina has changed gender, is in the with the revolutionaries, and we don't know it, or is somewhere, and we might see her. As the chapters progress, the possibilities narrow, since obviously we are seeing the world, meeting people, exploring land, and for now, there is nothing to support this. There are things somewhat against this theory, and obviously, besides the fact that all of this is very crazy, it could potentially undermine Zoro's character a bit, because Zoro's motivation comes precisely from Quina. I mean, he wants to be the best swordsman in the world because of Quina, well, I wanted to be it, and Zoro said, well, then I will be it, since you cannot. So, well, this is supposed to be part of the theory. Personally, I have to say that it's one of those theories that makes me slightly suspicious. That is to say, it's a theory that makes me doubt everything. When I see it, I think, why is Yvonne in the background? I mean, why is Yvonne there? Why were the revolutionaries there? Why does nobody give me a logical explanation for this? Oda, why did you put Tashigi in the story who looks just like Quina? I mean, what are you plotting with Quina? I don't know what he's plotting with Quina, but I tell you from heart, I am 99% convinced that Oda is going to do something with Quina. I don't know what. I don't know what kind of crazy idea, but something is going to happen. I don't know why. There are many strange things that maybe he has already forgotten, or maybe he doesn't want to do it anymore. But I tell you, so strange. So as I said, this would be the third theory, so well, leave me a comment on what you think about whether you believe it will happen. If you believe not, if you would like it, well, you know the usual. Let's go to the next one. Let's go to the fourth theory, and this is something that really is absurd, but maybe not so much, okay? Maybe not so much, and it is that Oda is making the story, continuing it according to fan theories. This is something I have heard, especially a lot from One Piece haters, honestly, but it's something that made me think, and I said, hey, maybe he did something. And well, the theory basically says that Oda reached a point where he didn't really know which way to go. It's not possible to say exactly when. Perhaps these are situations, but he doesn't know which way to go, since they say that, well, he might have the entire ending planned out in his head and such. The whole final area might be planned, but perhaps getting from point A to point B, well, he hasn't completely figured it out, as he could go one way, he could go another. You kind of know what I mean, right? That things perhaps at the time of telling the story, well, it will not be done completely well, not knowing where to go and such. Maybe things he left in the work he himself has forgotten, or something like that. And the theory says that he sees fan theories, sees theories on Reddit, on YouTube, or wherever, and that he develops the story based on things he reads there. Maybe not 100%, but perhaps he incorporates ideas, in the sense that someone comes up with a really good theory with two things that Oda might have left at some point, and that perhaps that was simply by chance. But Oda picks up those things he has included and turns that theory into reality, and he can read things in very popular places that have very good ideas about the series and might develop them later on. And as an argument in favor of this, I have to say that Oda once mentioned, I don't know if it was in an SBS or in an interview, that he did watch a One Piece channel, and he said, I watch a One Piece channel, but it's such a small channel that if I told you, you probably wouldn't believe me, or something like that, implying it was a very small channel. Obviously, he was referring to mine. Zerda, but you have more than 100,000 subscribers now, but at the time I didn't. Obviously, he's referring to mine. You already know, and here we get 95% of the theories right, except for the Tiger Man, obviously, and for now, about the moon. The thing is that, as I say, the theory sounds absurd, but it's not dismissible, since I, for example, if I were Oda, might rescue ideas. I mean, Oda will have very good ideas in his head, but that all the people in the world, everyone talking about One Piece, no one has a better idea than Oda in certain aspects or at certain times is completely impossible. Since, for example, imagine that upon leaving Wano, he was planning to go I don't know where, saw the idea of going toward Egghead and said, hey, I was thinking of introducing Vegapunk later on. I'll dedicate an island to him. So, something like that. That's what I mean. I mean, for him to see ideas or ways to develop it or something like that and continue the story with it. I don't think it's to a great extent. I don't think Oda develops the whole story based on things he sees on the internet by any means, but I think perhaps he might have taken some inspiration at certain moments. Honestly, I personally believe that yes, and I think it's something nice and I think it's good because I think even the fans of One Piece, sometimes we can say things very, although 90% might be crap, really. So, well, let me know in the comments what you think of this theory. If you are kind of thinking that Oda might include things in the work that he sees, or maybe not. Let's go with the next one. Let's go with the 5th theory. And it's true, we don't stop, we don't stop. Crazy, 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 crazy. The theory is that Buggy is the son of Rock's Beck, and I'm sharing this theory with you because I believe it. I believe it, I believe in this theory, I believe it. I'll even give you a very good argument. The thing is, well, as for Buggy's father, no idea for now. At one point, there was a lot of theorizing that, well, that Rox was the father of Shanks and all that. It seems that no, it seems it's going to be Figureland Garling. It makes 90% sense. I mean, supposedly Shanks is from the Figureland family. This one too. Well, it's obvious. Although until they tell me directly in the manga, I don't trust it. The thing is, Buggy, we also need to know where he comes from. So he comes from God Valley. Alright, okay, alright. But who is the father? I mean, it could perfectly be another of the Holy Knights. And if he is the son of Rox, so what? I mean, for me, it would make a lot of enough. It's good, right? It makes a lot of sense, really. I'm serious. I mean, let's see. I look at Buggy and I say, a great pirate with presence, with quality, with style, who is going to be the king of pirate? No. I mean, I know it sounds like a joke. No, I'm serious. I mean, let's see. Buggy is a character who was an apprentice of Roger. That is no coincidence. I mean, Roger wouldn't take just anyone as an apprentice. He probably took him because if he thought Rox was a great pirate or was a great pirate, it made sense to enlist his son. So here I'm gonna tell you something. Let's see. The theory, as I said, there are several ideas. I'm gonna tell you a bit about what I think, really. I think that maybe Rox was not that strong. Perhaps Rox was not so powerful and was just a very lucky person. I'll give you an example. People like Hadrudin think that Usopp is super powerful and that he is God Usopp and so on. And Usopp is, well, Usopp. And there are people in the world of One Piece who think that Buggy is a super powerful emperor with a mastermind, and it's Buggy. I mean, do you know what I mean? The name of Buggy, look at the impact it has had on the world. That he's not an emperor such, I don't know. It's Buggy. I mean, it's Buggy. As we know, everything works out well for him. So imagine if the same happened to Rox, since, well, we know that Rox's crew banded together. Well, let's say to get treasures and so on and whatnot. It could be that everyone there feared their captain greatly and had great respect for him in the sense that maybe he was very lucky. Maybe he was very lucky and was a person, well, like Buggy, right? So this is the theory I go with because it seems interesting to me. So it may be that the legend of Rox and all that is simply about a person who was very lucky like Buggy and who even managed to have a very powerful crew, which is very similar to what is happening to Buggy, who is going to have a very powerful crew, already having Hancock and Crocodile, who are two very powerful figures, and is starting to form his crew to, well, to be an emperor. I mean, he is already starting to have certain things. So it could be that the same happened with Rox. And I'll give you a very silly detail, which is that when we saw God Valley, which, by the way, I don't think we'll see the fight. Well, I've been saying that for a long time, but it does not appear. When we saw God Valley, we did not see Rox Beck. We did not see his face. We saw everything, but not the face of Rox Beck. So I ask you, what is the point of not showing the face of Rox Beck? I mean, does it matter? Like, what does it matter? What could we gather from Rox Beck's face? I mean, if he looked, for example, like Blackbeard, what would we gather? That he's his son. Well, in One Piece, there are faces that look alike. There are characters that look alike, characters that don't look alike at all in our father and son. Well, Dragon and Luffy. If I show you Dragon and Luffy, you wouldn't say they are father and son, honestly. I mean, you know what I mean. So why would you hide Rox's face? Could it be because there's something a bit different, perhaps? Maybe there's something that might lead you to think he resembles a character. Wow. Maybe yes, right? What if, for example, for instance, Rox had Buggy's nose? You didn't see that coming, did you? You didn't see that one coming. Imagine that. Imagine if Rox really had the Buggy's nose. I mean, lots of laughs with Rox, lots of laughs with Buggy, haha, the red nose. But the red nose is still something very representative of Buggy. They always tease him about it, like, They say, oh, red. And he says, oh, red, are you talking about my nose? Oh, big, are you talking about my nose? I mean, they always talk about that, right? It's like a very distinctive detail of Buggy. And why not have the rocks too? I mean, it would make perfect sense. I mean, if I imagine Buggy's father, I imagine he would have that nose. If not, where does that nose come from? We've seen he has had it since he was little, because no, that nose is not fake. That nose is real. That is his real nose. So, I really think that when we see Rocks, he'll have Buggy's nose and be his father. Then, as I said, he might be a joke character like Buggy, or he might be super strong, I don't know. I think the idea of him being very Buggy would be funny. Really, it would be very funny, but I think he's gonna have Buggy's nose, and that's why Oda doesn't show us his face. I mean, I know this sounds very absurd because you're gonna tell me, well, I don't know what, I don't know how many. Well, I truly believe it makes sense to be true. I really believe it. I truly think it makes sense to be true. So, I know many people will agree, but I also know that many people will strongly disagree with this and think I'm crazy. Probably rightfully so. So, well, leave me a comment about what you think of this. If you think Rocks could be Buggy's father, and if not, well, Rocks, what does the story have to do with, okay, what relationship is it going to have? Is it going to be related to Blackbeard as his father? Buggy is going to have a father or not, because Buggy has to come from somewhere. I mean, we already have that Shanks' father is going to be someone important. I suppose that Buggy's, well, also in the sense that it has a lot of parallels with Shanks, that they found both of them after God Valley and such, like two babies. I mean, you know what I mean, right? So I don't know, to me it makes a lot of sense in that. Leave it in the comments, and it's just the 5th theory. Imagine what's coming next. Now we go with the 6th one, and this one, truly, I think without joking, and I think it's the craziest of all. Seriously, I think this 6th theory is the craziest of all. I saw it the other day on Twitter, and I said, I have to make a video. I started thinking of ideas to include theories here, and I've made the video XCUL exclusive for this theory. You could practically say the truth. You could say yes. The thing is that the theory is, hold on to your seats, because you didn't see this coming from anywhere, that Zoro will become the best swordsman in the world, and then change his sex to be a woman to fulfill Kina's dream. Yes, 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 yes. It's not, yes, it's not a joke. It's not a joke. Let's see, the theory, well, this is really wild now. This is really wild. But unfortunately, as I say, it could, true. The thing is, well, let's go directly to Zoro's character. The goal, what is it? To be the pirate. No, not the pirate. The most powerful swordsman in the world. The pirate, well, he will also be the strongest pirate swordsman in the world. The thing is, well, Zoro wants to be the most powerful swordsman in the world. We get that far. Why does he want to be that? Also to fulfill Queena's dream and so on, and this and that. I mean, it's his motivation and everything. And then the theory, it sounds like a joke. The theory says that, of course, since Quina couldn't be because she was a woman, so Zoro, once he becomes the strongest swordsman in the world, will say, now I will become a woman and thus be the strongest woman in the world. Swordswoman and the strongest swordsman in the world. That is to say, it would fulfill Quina's dream, since Quina cannot because she is dead. I mean, let's see. It's just that, let's see. It sounds like a joke, but as I tell you, there's nothing for you to say. No, it's impossible. I mean, no, it's, unfortunately, there is a possibility. It exists, right? I mean, it's just that it makes me laugh, really. Well, the thing is, can this happen? No, it's just that, let's see. Could it happen? It could happen. What does it mean? Well, for me, aside from that, I think it would be a super random thing in the work, but super random. I want to understand the point of being the strongest female swordswoman. I want to understand it, and I buy it. I mean, I buy that point, and I think it would be good that in the end, if there is a woman who is the most powerful, I mean, I can accept that. But for me, it doesn't make sense. I mean, if Zoro goes through his entire journey to become the best swordsman as a man, and in the end changes to become a woman, he is agreeing with Quina that she couldn't see the strongest female swordsman, meaning she couldn't be it because it had to be a man. I mean, the logic would have been if Zoro changed gender before, and were a woman and continued advancing and progressed as a woman. And there I would say, okay, fine, I'm a woman, I've progressed, I've become the most powerful swordswoman. But if you become the most powerful swordsman as a man, and then change to a woman, all the merit of the progress, the increase in strength and level, he has it being a man, not being a woman. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, it would be almost worse. It would be like, hey Kina, hey, do you remember you said you couldn't be the strongest swordswoman because you were a woman? You were right, I was a man, and I could. Here, take that, and now I'm a woman, and now I can. No, it's just, dude, it's a bit, No, I don't know. It's a bit like cheating. It's like if I raced with the fastest man in the world, I go in a car, reach the finish line, and in the last step I get out and cross it and say, hey, look, now I'm the fastest in the world. Well, no, you did the journey in a car. Of course, it doesn't make sense. Of course, it's just, well, I don't know. I mean, it's a very strange thing. It's a very strange thing. I mean, it can happen, and I truly understand the idea, but it doesn't have much logic. I mean, if it arrives being a man and then you change to a woman, it's like, what merit does it have then? I don't know. It's very strange. It's very strange, honestly. I mean, I would like to see a very, very strong woman swordsman. Honestly, I hope it happens. But at the moment, where we are, I don't see anyone. Honestly, not at the moment. Hopefully, yes. Hopefully it would happen, and it would be interesting. But as I say, well, no, the truth is no. I mean, let me know in the comments what you think of this theory. I know that many of you, you're gonna laugh, but I know there will be someone in the comments who will say, no, Zara. In fact, I like this theory, and it makes a lot of sense. Also because, look, this, and they will explain it to me. I don't know, for me, I don't know, I understand the point, but it really makes me laugh. I just don't see the sense in it at all, really. No. But, oh, well, that's what this video is for, right? To make absurd theories and have everyone go a little crazy in the head. I mean, what can I know, man, that's it. So let's go directly to the next one, and this is also well, as I say, it's very crazy, you know, it's certainly absurd, but well, many people think it, and I can understand the point, even. The theory says that, pay attention, Gecko Moria is going to resurrect Ace and Whitebeard, and sometimes even Roger is mentioned, with his devil fruit of reanimating zombie corpses and all this for the war. Final battle. Yes. Let's see. The idea says that, of course. Let's see. We have to put it into context. First of all, what is the final battle? The final battle is supposed to be the One Piece's final war. Its name suggests it. The thing is, Oda spoke at one point and said that the final war would leave Mona at Marineford. You've probably heard that the Wano War is going to leave Mona at Marineford. That's a translation error made up by YouTubers just to get views, okay? I'm informing you in case you didn't know. The thing is, he talked about the final war, which, if you think about it, makes more sense, really, than the Wano War leaving Mona at Marineford. The thing is, well, let's go directly to the final war. This war is supposed to be the greatest madness in history. So what greater madness than bringing back those who died in the other war, the Marineford War? Ace and Whitebeard. Once again, both of them, Luffy, arm in arm with Sabo and with Ace, being a corpse against the government and the Navy. Shirohige too with Luffy. Alright, let's go. I don't know what. Hey, let's see. The theory makes sense. Let's see. Of course it makes sense. I mean, it's possible. We've seen a story arc dedicated to reanimating corpses, which is Thriller Bark, where there are zombies, etc. They take Orz's corpse, put shadows into it, and make it super powerful and such. Okay. First of all, we need the shadows, to enter Ace's corpse. And to enter Shirohige's corpse, very powerful shadows will be needed. You can't just put anyone's shadow in. You will need very powerful shadows. From whom are you going to take those? Shadows. For now, I can't think of anyone, and the theories don't mention it. In the theories, it seems like Moria turns the bodies on and off as he pleases. That's something that needs to be studied, honestly. So based on this, we would need something, a very big shadow, which, as I say, is not out of the question, because who knows what could happen. For saying crazy things, Blackbeard could die, take his soul and put it in Whitebeard's. Just saying wild ideas, okay? Just saying wild ideas. It's not gonna happen, hopefully, but well, based on the fact that it's possible, it seems like a really wild idea to me. The fact that corpses can be reanimated and that we see Shirohige and Ace, I could buy it, you know? I could buy it at some point to destabilize Luffy. Imagine an Ace fighting on Kurohige's side to destabilize Luffy. I can buy it. Really, I could buy it. And it could even be interesting. If the moment is to destabilize Luffy, well, then I buy it. But for the final war to be also Disney, where suddenly Shirohige, Ace, and everyone appear, I don't know, even Roger, as I said, they say, no, it's about picking up Roger's corpse and such. I don't know, it's very Disney, really. It's very crazy. It's about bringing back characters that have already been removed from the work, with a purpose, which is to show Kurohige's power, have the Yonko thing, capture Ace, for him to die so Luffy trains and bring them back for the final war, like unnecessarily. I think the new generation, I think that the characters that are alive are the ones that have to handle that final war, because it's also a way to avenge Shirohige and avenge Ace, who died in that war. I mean, that war in the end, in some way, those who suffered the most were the pirates, because they lost Ace and they lost Whitebeard. I mean, the Marines, no admiral or any really strong commander died. I mean, it didn't really happen. A lot of big stuff. I mean, they destroyed Marineford. It turned out very big, but there were no real losses of personnel. So, well, I don't know. I mean, I feel that for the final war, these characters shouldn't return. I mean, I think it should be the moment where the pirates, Luffy's crew, the allies, and all that, who will participate in the final war can manage on their own. So, as I say, let's see. Personally, I am not convinced by it at all. I mean, I believe other very crazy theories more than this one, so I wouldn't give it any credibility, but as I say, I can't dismiss it. That's the thing, I keep reading them, overthinking them, and especially I think to myself saying, Zara, of course, you may like them more or less. They may seem more or less realistic to you, but you can't dismiss it because there's nothing to say an argument against it. It's something. Be careful with this. Huh? So leave me a comment below with what you think about this theory, especially the idea of how far it could go concerning resurrecting them for the final war. If you imagine them resurrected on another ship against Kurohiga or something like that, leave your thoughts on the topic. I'm telling you, it doesn't convince me, but well, I like reading comments and hearing a bit from you, well, all those things. Let's go with the 8th theory, which is really, no, it's just that each one is almost worse than the previous, like saying, come on, let's all smoke. The thing is, let's get straight to the theory. The theory is that Rox is an impel down. Yes, I mean, Rox D. Zebek is an impel down. Let's see, someone might say, well, Zara, why? How is he an impel down? Just like that? I mean, Luffy is an impel down? Hasn't he seen him? Let's see. Everything comes from a very strange panel in the manga. It's a very strange panel, okay? It's a very strange panel. So, we have to go directly to impel down when Luffy is there, which is obviously the time we've seen impel down the most because, well, Luffy was running around there for the entire arc and we saw many things. We saw very, very, very many things. We have to go to the frozen level. Let's remember there was a frozen level, which I think was level 5.5. I think so. To be honest, I think so. I think it was 5.5, right? So, well, we have to go to that level. The thing is, there's a panel, which is certainly curious. There is a panel that is strange. Honestly, it is a strange panel, really. I'm planning to show it on screen. I'll likely show it to you in the anime. But well, it's also in the manga, and in this panel, a character appears who is completely frozen. And this character could resemble a little to the silhouettes we have seen of Rox D. Zebek, since as I say, we haven't seen his face or anything like that, but it seems that we have indeed seen his hair. It seems that the shape Zebek might have, we have seen. And it could be quite similar to this character, really. It could be quite similar to this character, so let's see. The idea, as I said, is that this character is Rox D. Zebek and that he is frozen. It all comes from a dialogue where they see this character and say, is he dead or is he conserved or preserved? Depends, however you want to say it. So, the dialogue is a bit like this, and of course they say something like, how strange is this character, this being, this person dead or sort of frozen? Well, the thing is that there is supposed to be something called cryogenics, which is something where you can preserve a person's body by freezing it without the person dying. If you do a very extreme freezing and such, I really don't know if it exists in a real way. But well, in One Piece we have seen, for example, what happened with Saul, the Ice Time Capsule, for instance. You know, something that, by the way, we accepted on the channel 3 or 4 months before it happened. Let's go. Then we also have, when Killy meets Luffy, he freezes him, and Robin too, and then they are fine, obviously. So, well, the theme of freezing a person and them being alive is there. So, of course, we see that the fact that this character is at that level, as if frozen, with a similarity to Rox and is an impel down. The thing is, the theory says that, of course, they captured Rox, put him in impel down. He went to this frozen level, level 5.5, I believe it was, and he stayed at that level. The thing is that when he was at that level, he froze. So that character has not aged. That character has not died. That character remains stable and just as powerful or as strong as at the moment he left, because the passage of time has not existed for him. I mean, he remains exactly the same. So of course the theory starts from that all this would imply that at some point we would return to Impel Down, this character would be unfrozen, and we would have Rock's Dig Zebek again. This is the theory, but let's see. I mean, I understand this perfectly. I mean, I understand it very well. I understand what it refers to, and I understand everything, and I can buy it because even the dialogue is strange in the sense that, like, saying it's preserved and such, and then bringing rocks into it. Personally, apart from not being able to rule it out, obviously, because there's no legal reason, so to speak, to rule it out, the thing is that I think this does have a connection with rocks, but not that it is rocks. Let me explain. I believe Oda has included certain clues about rocks throughout the work that we haven't been able to see, truly. I mean, I think there are things like this and another that I will mention now, which are hints we haven't been able to see about rocks. Well, this character could have some relation to rocks, in the sense that they might resemble something we will see in the situation with rocks later. Yes, I really believe so. Why? Because there is a character in Shanks' crew called Rockstar, and that character also coincidentally have hair similar to what Rocks would have. And in fact, in the first introduction of this character, who is going to deliver a message to Shirohige, some might remember, he delivers Shanks' message to Shirohige and says, "My name is Rockstar. Does it ring a bell to anyone? My name was very well known some time ago." So it implies that phrase about Rockstar being known as the character Rockstar. People say no, that it doesn't ring a bell, but sure, it could be making a reference that the name was his. Like, I mean, his name was known as Rocks, not Rockstar. I mean, not that this character is Rocks, but that Oda is giving us a hint. This name was indeed known some time ago, but not Rockstar. Rocks. And it wasn't you, it was someone else. You know what I mean, right? It's a bit strange. It's a very, very weird thing. So, starting from this, that they call each other similarly, that it has this phrase and such, I think these are things that Oda has gradually been introducing very, very, very slowly into the work to give us hints, foreshadows of the character of Rocks. One clue might be Rockstar, another clue might be this, and it could be that this character is the frozen body somewhere we don't know, that he died frozen or something with ice. It could be, or something with Impel Down, as you want to see it. I would lean towards the ice, personally. So could it be a clue? Yes, definitely yes, I really believe so. Now, that this character is Rocks seems to me an idea that today already very crazy. I don't think this character is Rocks. I want to say Blackbeard has been in Impel Down. If Blackbeard is supposed to have this relationship with Rocks, which seems to be the case, since Blackbeard's ship is called Saber of Zebek, Saber of Zebek, this character is supposed to have a lot of information about Rocks, or at least enough to consider the fact that he might be there and go look for him, right? Since Kurohige didn't go for that. He went for other things, unless later they tell us that his plan was to get Rocks out of there, that he didn't find him because such, well, it can happen, okay? It can happen, but as I say, it's not dismissible. So of course the thing is, Luffy was also around there. Nothing happened with this character, more established, and it would seem strange to me. Going back to Impel Down is something I would buy into in the story. I think that Buggy, Cross Guild, and those guys can go to Impel Down. They can cause big trouble. They can go to rescue Doflamingo. They can go to rescue Will if they take him there. They can form a new crew and such. But the fact that the character is Rocks, I don't know. I don't buy it. Really? I don't know. Besides, I think that a character like Rocks, they wouldn't send him to Impel Down. I think they would execute him directly. If they executed Roger, who was the king of the pirates, a character like Rocks, who was supposedly the Roger from way back, why wouldn't they execute him? I'm not even talking about a public execution, but a private execution. I think that's the first thing. Besides, it's supposed that he died in God Valley while the island was sinking. This is stated in the mangas. Of course, it could be a lie. The theory says that it's a lie and that they locked him up. It's weird. It's all very weird. Personally, it doesn't convince me. Leave me in the comments what you think about this 8th theory. We still have 2 more, but let me know there what you think, if you agree. If not, if you have heard this theory. I know that some time ago it became somewhat popular. I think it was because TikTok, but well, I don't know. It doesn't quite convince me, although, well, I've seen wilder things, to be honest. And for example, one that I've seen that might be wilder is the 9th theory, and it's really a horrible theory. It makes me funny. I find it very funny. I find these theories very funny, and and it's that Roger's egg is a faucet, but not the egg of Roger from the egg, the left egg and the right egg. No, the egg from the ship. It's supposed that the egg that was on Roger's ship, the egg, this, I will be showing it on screen. Surely, it's a griffin, but not a water faucet griffin. A griffin with wings and an eagle's beak, I think it was. Or head. No, I mean a griffin. I don't remember exactly what a griffin was. It was an amalgam of animals. Well, a griffin. You have it there on screen. A griffin. This is really crazy. I'll explain. The thing is, of course, this egg, if it is an egg, I think it's a stone. I think it's a rock. Well, rock will be roca. I think it's stone. Stone is piedra, right? If I'm not mistaken. I think. Well, the thing is, whatever. Supposedly, this animal was a griffin. What was inside the egg? Why? Well, it's supposed to be, of course. First of all, it's an egg that is not normal. I mean, it's an egg. Which is not normal. I mean, you see that egg and you say, well, this one here, I don't know what animal is gonna come out, but it's not gonna be a parakeet. I mean, a canary won't come out of there. It's going to be something very strange. So, of course, this theory of the griffin has come up because, of course, firstly, it's a mythological animal. I mean, it's an animal that, well, you could fit into something like this. Secondly, it has wings, so, well, it could fall under the bird category. Because of the eggs, the birds, and the whole thing, that birds lay eggs and all that. And then, a silly detail that really fuels the theory is that Shanks, who is obviously related to Roger because he is his top apprentice and so on, and he is the one who continues his legacy a bit, has a sword that is called Griffin, and that sword also resembles Roger's a lot, though it's not the same. Roger's is called Ace. Yes, he named his son after a sword. It's that, I don't know, it's like if I name my son PlayStation 5, it would be incredible. But as I say, supposedly Shanks having this sword called Griffin, which resembles Roger's, which performs the Kamisari just like Roger, meaning it has the same technique and everything. It's supposed to be a way to honor what was in that egg, and it's supposed that this animal, in fact, it's not a joke. It's supposed that animal would be in Elbaf. It's supposed that animal would be in Elbaf. If this is true, we should see it in not too many chapters. Like, we are in Elbaf right now. I mean, maybe we'll see it in 50 chapters or something like that. And that animal would be a friend of Shanks, like a pet, a friend, however you want to say it. But it would get along well with Shanks and is related a lot to this because Shanks had a strong connection with Elbaf. We've seen him in Elbaf and he has the Griffin's sword. So maybe that Griffin exists there and it could be related to Elbaf. In fact, to give more hype to the theory, which is something not included, but because the theory is older than this. When Shanks attacks Kid, we see that he performs an attack from which an aura of a griffin emerges. You see that attack with the aura, and it comes out like a griffin from there and attacks. This, obviously, surely I say, it will come from the sword, almost certainly. I say it will come from the name of the sword, but well, to reinforce it, it's included there, because the attack takes place in Elbaf. Let's remember that Shanks is on the coast of Elbaf and launches the attack at Kid precisely. That's why, right? I mean, being on the coast so it doesn't enter, and just as the griffin emerges. So the idea would be that this egg hatched. Time has passed. Obviously, a lot of time has passed since Roger's death. The animal has grown, and now it's in Elbaf as one of the guardians. They're like a bird, like, well, bird, I don't know what this animal might be. Well, bird, I don't know, bird, and it's there, and Shanks left it there to be comfortable, to have, well, let's say, a nice place to be and to live. That's why Shanks goes to Elbaf from time to time to also see the griffin and such, because they are friends, and as I said, it would come directly from that egg. So the theory is directly this. There aren't too many arguments other than the sword, this that I've mentioned to you now and the whole issue. It's a theory that, as I say, falls apart a bit in terms of arguments, but there's nothing to discard it. Why? Because having at least the name Griffin and representing a griffin, it already lets you understand the existence of the griffin in One Piece as an animal. That is to say, they have already shown you that this animal exists, because it exists even if only as a myth. Exists. And I think that if we are in One Piece and talking about myths, we have to keep an eye on it. Why? Because we have even seen the Sphinxes that are on Sphinx Island, since we saw Marco healing one, which in fact, if I am not mistaken, I think it was called Tama. No joke, I think that Sphinx was called Tama. So while we have already seen very strange animals like this, it is certainly a rare animal. So from here, half confirming the existence of the griffin animal in One Piece, hey, I think we can't rule out that it exists. I mean, we've seen, like I said, time travel. Luffy has a fruit that wasn't the Gomu Gomu. Marco is a phoenix. There are sphinxes. I mean, let's see. It's not a huge stretch to say, no, this is impossible because you're talking about a griffin and it's not real because of this. No, or, I mean, the thing is that this there's a possibility in there that in the end this could happen. I mean, it seems crazy to me because we're reaching a point where clearly in One Piece anything is possible. Practically. I mean, anything is possible. So starting from this basis, well, I don't know, it's there. Personally, I don't dislike the theory. I mean, it doesn't seem to me a thing that makes no sense and such, and that I can't see in the work, because the fact of reaching Elba, finding a Griffin over there, coming out of the egg, such, I don't know what, to connect it with Roger, Shanks, mythological creatures, and then it becomes, because there's also talk that the Griffin is an ancient weapon, but that's another topic, right? I won't go into that because we'll lose our minds. But well, it's very important, such, I don't know how many, it's something that I can buy from you. I can buy from you. I mean, fine, okay, I can buy from you, no jokes, seriously. I mean, I can actually buy from you. The thing is, it doesn't quite give me enough arguments to buy it. You know, I mean, it gives me like a 20, a 30% I can consider it. It could be there. I even like it. I mean, it's something I like, but I don't see enough arguments to say, well, it's very crazy, but I'll buy it. Because of course. I buy theories, let's see, I'm talking about going to the moon in One Piece. More far-fetched than that, which I haven't included in the video to avoid boring you with the moon stuff, but more far-fetched than going to the moon, really. I don't know. So hey, I don't know what to tell you. Let me know in the comments what you think about this 9th theory on the Griffin topic. And well, let's go straight to the 10th and last one. And it's the last one, which is something we won't know until many chapters later, in principle. And it's something that should happen practically at the end of the work. And it's something I must say that no matter how crazy the theory sounds and how many of you think no, I know there will be a large percentage of people who will say, I know not, but hopefully yes. I hope so. The theory says that Buggy will be the first to reach Laugh Tale. This theory, as crazy as it sounds, is quite popular and widely discussed in the community. There are a lot of people who, as I said, say it jokingly. Many people say, no, Buggy will get there first, haha. Well, I don't treat it as a haha theory. I mean, I treat it as a craziness, but the possibility is there. I mean, the theory suggests that, of course, Luffy is supposed to find the One Piece first and all that, but, of course, Buggy is also after the One Piece. In fact, the last few times we've seen him, he's given speeches saying, I want the One Piece, I want the treasure, I want to be the king of the pirates. Even when Crocodile and Machok told him not to do it, he ignored them and said, I know you're going to crush me, but I don't care. It's my dream. I have to say it. And he said it. So, seeing him face that, seeing the guts he had and all, which by the way, I really respect that Buggy did that. I mean, I think it's something that surprises me and I like it, seeing Buggy seriously talking about his dream and that he wants the One Piece. Honestly, I like it. So of course, this fact combined with Buggy's tremendous luck, can anyone rule out that he might not be the first to arrive at Laugh Tale? I mean, I want to say, that wouldn't affect Luffy's dream either. I mean, Luffy wants the One Piece, okay? He can arrive second. I mean, it could be that Buggy arrives and can't get it. That can happen. That can happen since they talk about reaching Laugh Tale. Buggy can arrive and Luffy could take it from him easily. Say to him, hey, let's play a David Backfire or something like that, right? And Luffy keeps it in the end, okay? It could happen. But of course, don't you think that if Buggy arrives at Laugh Tale, isn't it crazy? I mean, to get to Laugh Tale, what do you need? The 4 red poneglyphs, obviously, right? But do you think Buggy needs the 4 red pony lifts? I think not. I mean, I really think not. I mean, Buggy might be able to say, come on, let's go to Laugh Tale. Well, I don't know what. I'm gonna get on a ship. Come on, let's go look for the One Piece. Surely if we search well, we'll find it. Buggy, come on, let's go this way. Come on. By chance something happens, bam, they end up at Laugh Tale. It can happen. I mean, what are we talking about with Buggy? He became a Yonko by sheer luck. I mean, he's the luckiest character in the series. Even more than Usopp, honestly, even more than Usopp. So, the theory that Buggy could reach Laugh Tale first is something that, as I say, sounds very much like a joke. But besides not being something to be discarded, it's something that if you stop and analyze it seriously and in detail, hey, maybe it's not so crazy, son. Maybe it's not so crazy. Maybe you look at it and say, phew. Maybe you look at it and say, phew, maybe it's not so crazy. Maybe it's not that crazy. I mean, we would have to analyze things very well. We would have to analyze very well how everything works, but it seems to me that it is something to consider. It seems to me that it is something to consider. I mean, the whole thing with Buggy being someone who arrives at Laugh Tale first, but not necessarily finding the One Piece or interfering with Luffy's dream is something that sounds very crazy, but I've already seen him do crazier things. I mean, when I said that Buggy was going to be a Yonko, they called me crazy. I mean, I remember the comments on the video saying, come on, how is he going to be a Yonko? The joke is here, and so on. It could be that it comes close or at the end of One Piece. Many told me that, but I said no. I think it's gonna happen now. I mean, right after Wano ends. And that's literally what happened. Why? Because with Buggy, he is a meme character. That is, a character that Oda loves because he can do whatever he wants with him. I mean, if he decides Buggy eats another fruit, he can do it. Why? Because Buggy has a red nose and he can. Period. That's it. He is the script personified, it doesn't matter. So as I say, I know that many of you are gonna say, no Sarah, that's the end of the joke. Serena, son, haha, hehe, right? That's it. But others are going to say, hey, I don't believe it, but I wish. I mean, I really think there will be people who will say to me, it would thrill me, it would thrill me, it would be very amusing to me, but very amusing. But I wouldn't like to see Buggy arrive. I'd like us to arrive and Buggy to be there. I mean, I'd like to see Luffy, Lofty, such, yes, I don't know what, such. Everyone's super excited, such, they go there. Hey, there's someone. Who is it? Such. Hey, maybe it's an old pirate, you know. They get closer, Buggy is there kicking the chest. Damn chest. Why won't you open? You know, something or other. And he can't open it because he's not the chosen one, and he's kicking it. Damn One Piece, you know, something or other. It would be really funny, man. I'd find it hilarious to see Luffy saying, what are you doing here? I don't know. I mean, it would be a moment. I think I would laugh for 2 hours. I mean, I think I'd spend 2 hours thinking about it and laughing. In fact, I think about it, and it makes me laugh. I swear to God, I think about it, and I say, well, of course. Imagine the situation of Luffy arriving, seeing Buggy kicking the chest. Ah, damn One Piece, whatever. And Luffy, what are you doing? What are you doing? And the other, just leave it. Whatever. I don't know. And the other, what are you doing here, Luffy? The other, what are you doing here? It would be very funny, man. It would be very amusing. And seeing Mihawk and Zoro like, oh, look, you guys made it. Like, I don't know. I mean, it would be really cool. Dude, so I don't know. These are my crazy ideas, huh? I'm taking this to the extreme a bit, but since the theory excites me, it makes me happy, folks. It makes me happy. So hey, I like it, and I think as a 10th absurd theory, it's very good. But what interests me most about this theory is the comments. I mean, in the comments, I don't just want you to tell me, oh, I think it happens. Oh no, I think so, such, I don't know. Leave it, that too. But above all, tell me if it excites you. I mean, would it make you excited if Buggy got to the cell? Like, it would really amuse me. I mean, I think it would make me excited. I mean, it would make me excited. And yeah, I know it might seem strange to you. Like, no, of course, obviously Luffy has to get there already. But I don't know. It would make me excited, to be honest. I'm like a little kid with these things. To be honest, I'm like a little kid, small child. So leave it in the comments as it interests me. You know, I always read you, and that would be 10 completely absurd theories of One Piece. But that could be true. I want you to tell me right now, out of all the 10 I mentioned, which one you found the most far-fetched and which one you think is going to happen. If out of these 10 you say, I think there's one that has to happen 100%, I bet on this one. Leave it in the comments. Which one is it? I'm interested to know. If I had to pick one, I would say the one about Zoro becoming the best swordsman and changing his sex. No, obviously not that one. No, I don't really know which one I would say, to be honest. I'd have to think about it for a while, and I don't feel like thinking about it, really. My head works very simply, so simple that right now you give it a like. Subscribe to the channel to support the video because you liked it and I get happy. As simple as that, that's simple. So you know, if you like the video, you can leave a huge like. Subscribe to the channel for more videos. A big greeting and see you in the next video.